How you like your holster? Good.
I'll do whatever.
Yeah, I got the same thing. My car got totaled, so I gotta go by and try to get it.
Mind everybody turn your microphone on?
Good. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm trying to call James and tell her we can go live now.
No, his, Trey's battery's dead.
Here.
Hello? Battery's dead. Here's another one.
Test. Close enough.
I just watched my hands. He didn't wash his hands. Let me know when you're ready. All right, I'll go ahead and officially call this meeting to order. I appreciate everybody's patience. Our special call meeting today in the council chambers, and doing as best we can to get everything on, I guess, the live stream and practice social distancing as best as possible. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just the way you looked at me like, stay away. Okay. But no, it's a serious time. It's nice that we can at least make light of a few things. Welcome to everybody who's watching, and thank you, the less than, or 10 or less people that are here. And I'd like to turn it over to our Vice Chairman, Chris Bowers, for our invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Our dear Lord and gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight to say thanks. Thank you for all the many blessings, all your mercies, all your graces that you've bestowed upon us, God. We pray that you be with our frontline workers and our first responders and all those that's making the world tick right now, Lord, keeping us all safe and protected and healthy, God. Just pray that you be with them and their families, Lord. Pray that you be with us tonight as we discuss the business of the county, and that you give us wisdom, discernment, and guidance as we do that, God. We love you. We thank you for all that you have done and all that you're going to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. At this time, I'd like to turn it over for our first item, which is an update on regarding COVID-19 to Mr. Roper. Mr. Roper.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen. I wanted to give you an update a little bit on where we stand and where we are headed. Obviously, you've all been following the news. You've been following the official announcements from the governor. As recently as just a couple hours ago, the governor made an announcement extending the state of emergency for the state for 15 more days, which would carry us, I guess, to the 12th or 13th of May. What's that? May 9th. I can't do the math, but he's extended it for another 15 days, which is his limitations under state law. Because of that, and as we keep watching what the governor is doing, we have tried to look at what we reasonably should do, what we should, as Pickens County government, should do. Obviously, as we were discussing earlier, what the governor dictates, Councilman Hudson, has a lot more impact on local economy than what the county might dictate. But the county government needs to respond in a way that's appropriate as this situation unfolds. So what we have been doing up to now is looking at things in sort of 2-week increments. The governor's doing things in 15-day increments. We do things in 14-day increments. And we were talking today, we've been pretty proud of ourselves, if we could be, that we feel like we've planned a step ahead of what the state is saying. And so when they were ready to start closing some things down, we already had plans in place to do that. And a lot of that credit for that goes to our emergency management folks, our human resources folks, some of our other staff members that I want to point out as we talk. And I want to take maybe 10 minutes or so of your time right now and talk about how we are prepared for when the governor says that it's time to start opening things back up. What does that look like on a county level? And some of our marketing folks have come up with a concept that I want to show you all called Kickstart Pickens County. So the concept that we have is that as we come back out of this, we're going to need locally to have a kickstart. And that kickstart is going to have two big components. One component I can talk about here tonight is the staff plan. And I'm going to show you the way that we are targeting and planning on doing this to get your feedback before we go official with that and start telling the public. The other component of our kickstart is going to be council options. If you remember at our last meeting, Councilman Hendricks and Councilman Bowers both indicated that they would like some potential economic development ideas, and I think the rest of council was in general agreement that we needed to come up with some proposals for you. And so at the conclusion of this presentation, I'm going to give you a series of ideas. They are just that. They're ideas. We've talked about them as a staff. They're to varying degrees of development, but we want you to think about them, and we're not going to ask for any action tonight. We just want you to think about them because philosophically, you as the policymakers are going to decide what the appropriate council decisions are, economic development options are, local stimulus options are. So we're going to give you some different options, and then you may have thoughts beyond what we have. But we want to just go ahead and give you some ideas as a starting place for the conversation, thanks to Councilman Hendricks and Councilman Bowers and the rest of y'all's direction at our last meeting. So we're giving you some of those options, but keep in mind that it is not a comprehensive list. It's thoughts that the county staff has had over the last week to 10 days on things that we might could do to spur local economy. But to begin with the staff plan, as I talked to you before, we like to look at this in 2-week increments, and we like to be flexible. So if, for example, there were a big outbreak here in the next week or so, and the governor and the folks down in Columbia had a recommendation, we would be able to adapt this by moving it in 2-week blocks. But as things stand now, we have 3 phases for what we would like to do. Phase 1 is to take where we are now and to begin scaling up in reasonable incremental ways. Phase 2 would be May 18th is what we're planning. And that would be kind of a soft opening of county buildings, having limited access, but still allowing some public access to the building. And then with the goal being phase 3 being a June 1st open. Now, when we say a June 1st open, the way that things are going to work is not going to be the same that it was on March 1st. It won't be the same because we're all going to have learned a lot in this process. Our planning department, for example, has learned how to do building inspections sitting in someone's front yard while the contractor or the homeowner walks around in the house and shows them video with their phones. There's things like that we've learned that we're not going to unlearn. We've learned that perhaps when we get more than 2 or 3 people in a room, we need to stay distant from each other, and we're going to continue that. So just because June 1st is called fully open, it's fully open with all the social distancings that we've learned. It's the things that we've learned that we can't unlearn and shouldn't unlearn. It's the new normal is what I would call it. But let's look at a couple of the different ways that these phases of reopening will work. And you'll see here, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I've really talked through this process other than to look at phase 2. That's the midpoint, beginning to bring things online to prepare for a full open, continuing physical office changes that need to be made to protect our staff, allow for social distancing of both staff and the public, request needed supplies such as masks, hand sanitizers, et cetera. So that phase 2, when we get to that point, we're going to be geared up and ready to do limited interaction here in the building and here in our satellite locations within the target again for a full open on June 1st. How will that look in different departments? And let's skip through the next couple of slides because this has got a lot of repeating information that's more intended for staff. So continue on past phase 1, phase 2. We've talked about that. One thing that I like about this is that it's adaptable. Like we said, if we had developments that caused us to take a step back or to delay implementation of a phase, we would be able to do that. Individual department reopening plans, I'm going to give you a few samples here. Again, we'll be pushing out this information over the next week or so. The first example that I've got to point to actually came from our Parks, Recreation, and Tourism office. They came up with this approach, and I have to give Allison Fowler with PRT and Tyler Merck at PRT the credit for actually coming up with this 3-phase approach. And so they took this when it comes to Pickens County and talked about Mile Creek Park. So if you can roll up to that. Mile Creek Park, what they're going to do in phase 1 is they're going to open Mile Creek Park for existing reservations only. The playground will remain closed. The picnic shelters will remain closed. The boat ramp remains open. The bathroom facilities will open back up. It'll be in the day use area will be closed. The park office will remain closed. So if you have a reservation existing They're going to go ahead and let people take those reservations and complete those reservations. But then coming up on phase 2 for Mile Creek Park, they're going to keep the playground picnic shelter closed, but they'll start opening the day use area, the beach, so to speak, for a small amount of capacity, and the park office will remain closed. And then starting June 1st, the way they envision phasing up is they'll start taking new reservations. They'll start opening the playground, and they'll open the day use area. So again, we may at some point say, no, we need to step back to phase 2 now. But at least they're making those plans and starting to think that through. The same is true for the museum. They've come up with kind of a 2-phase approach because there's not enough foot traffic now in the museum to really think about 3 phases. There's also 1 employee there. Also, the Pickens County Performing Arts Center, you'll see that they've made plans there as well if you'll roll on down. One thing they're going to do is continue to schedule virtual concerts, encourage patrons to print tickets at home, encourage payment via credit card and online portal. They've rescheduled many of the events. I think you may have seen that some of the events are being rescheduled into the summer. And then I saw the Ginger Billy show. I'm not familiar with that act. That one's been rescheduled to the fall. I saw at least one smile. So
Comedy.
It's comedy? Okay. So they're rescheduling those, but in the meantime, we're going to do more virtual concerts in the facility just to keep the brand going in that regard. If you look at the airport has a 3-phased approach. They're starting to get a little commercial traffic back at the airport, which is good for us on gas sales. But we're going to look at normal manning of the access or of the terminal on May 18th. Still some restricted access to the terminal. One thing that is referenced here is you see the aid agency interface. Until May 4th, we continue with our current operations. The aid agency interface would be the work that our county employees are doing for Meals on Wheels, the United Way, the Gleaning House, organizations such as that, where we've identified a need, and through the work of the task force that was enabled by your declaration of an emergency, we have been able to give those aid agencies county employees where there was a demonstrated need. That we're planning on continuing through May 4th because that's when your emergency declaration extends through. But then we have asked, and depending on what y'all do with the emergency declaration, we will look to phase that out on May 15th. The reason those 2 are together, because another employee I'd like to brag on is Carlos Salinas. He's a retired Air Force, very good organizational skills. He's the director of our airport. When he saw his capacity at the airport growing because there weren't many planes coming in, he contacted me and said, what do you need me to do? And so I put him in charge on the task force of coordinating with the outside agencies. So they all know, the United Way knows if they need people to drive for Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, which they needed this week, they contact Carlos, and Carlos is the point person for the rest of county government, finding those people. He has been integral in what we've been able to do with the outside agencies, something that I think we will probably brag about in the future in more formal ways. But so you'll see that as he phases up, our outside agency interface is going to phase down. The outside agencies have been very thankful, very gracious, and they've just said, when you get to the point that you need to start phasing down, give us notice. So this is going to be part of that process. That's the reason we mentioned the airport. Community development, that is impossible to read because it's so, I guess, the way that it is blown up. But know that they're all also looking at, you see phase 1, no inspections in occupied structures. That's what they've been doing now, where they park in the yard. They still do the inspections, but they do it by video. They're going to still try to do that going forward. But now they're not even doing staff meetings or boards and commissions meetings. They'll bring those back over phases over time. If you continue on, Public Service Commission, similarly, they have a 3-phased system. And I wanted to give you these as examples without getting into weeds too much, just to know that we're thinking through these processes. Same is true with the elected officials. The next one's the probate court. The probate court has adopted the 3-phase system because they're in this building, but they're under no obligation to do so. That's an elected official. But he's been very cooperative in how they're going to open their court up to traffic as time goes on. Same is true for the auditor. The auditor has adopted the Kickstart 3-phase method that we're working on. The library, not to be outdone by our 3 phases, has a very detailed, and the library, they're really heroes to us right now, but they have a very detailed 4-phase system when they're going to open back up as we institute our 3 phases. So I wanted you to just see that they have given us a great deal of thought, and they are coordinating with us on how they're going to open. They're going to look at opening up the drive-through as a part of phase 1 on May 4th. They'll slowly expand their services. The Pickens County Library folks, I would be remiss if I did not tell you that they have been heroes to us through this process. When they shut their buildings, Stephanie Howard, the library director, contacted me and said, we've got custodial staff now with nothing to do. And I said, get them with Carlos Salinas. He'll find them something to do. And he did. They've been cleaning what they call the tower at Pickens County Mills on Wheels, which is where the mills are placed and then picked up. So it's the central hub for Mills on Wheels. They've also been packing some of the mills and cleaning the kitchen area. Library employees, but we've repurposed them during this crisis. Stephanie has been great with that. When our elections office suddenly one day was just vacant. No workers, no commissioners. I put the head librarian for the Pickens and the Liberty branch in there with Stephanie's okay and one of their top assistants in there. And they kept the place running. We've now got a library board, and I've backed away. But I just want to say that the library, their folks, Stephanie Howard and their folks, have proved to be 2 things. Number 1, public servants willing to work with us in whatever need we have. But number 2, a part of the county government that was invested in technology, and it has showed. They have been able to provide a lot of services that we wouldn't otherwise have. So I want to brag on the library and Stephanie Howard. But you can see they have a very detailed plan. The other thing is, and this will zoom back out, Accelerate SC, you've seen that Governor McMaster has announced his reopening plan, his business plan. It's important to me, and I think it should be important to our county government as a whole, that we incorporate ourselves in Accelerate SC. And I'll tell you what inspired me to do this, and that is, again, Director Salinas at the airport, who has been beating down my door with things that he's identified in the CARES Act. You know, the CARES Act you've seen so much publicity about from the federal government. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Without getting into details, you know how the county is in the process of purchasing property at the airport. And we're purchasing that with a federal grant that has a 5% local match. Well, Director Salinas was able to discover that under the CARES Act, that local match goes away. Right. So yeah, exactly.
How much did he save us?
Well, that purchase price, I can't do math. You may know off the top of your head, Ralph. You may not.
Was it
It's in the 5 digits.
I saw 3 million. Does that sound like about what that was?
The purchase number is going to be smaller than that, so I would say it's probably $30,000 to $40,000.
Wow.
Just because he kept up with it.
Wow.
And kept bothering me about it, okay? In addition to that, he has educated himself on the CARES Act and identified $65,000 in funding for us to just do upfits at our facility. The idea of that money is that we're not taking an income, right, from fuel sales. So the CARES Act says, no, here's how you can spend some money, that's our money, to keep things going. One of the things that allowed us to do is then look at the 2 tenants down there, the commercial tenants that do repairs and flight schools, and tell them, you don't owe us any rent for April and May. Okay, and we felt like that was a good thing to keep them on board, but it was all because of him investigating. So watching him do that, I said, okay, if the state's going to start its version of the CARES Act, if it's going to have some infrastructure in place, I want our county staff incorporated. And so what we're going to do, and this is a lot of reading, this is for the staff, we're repurposing this PowerPoint, but keep rolling. Basically, Accelerate SC has come up with several responses to the event, and they have different components to them. And what I am going to do is assign individual staff persons to coordinate with those folks. Accelerate SC has said governance is one of the things they're concerned about. Information, response, those sorts of things. And so I want to see those 5, response, protections, governance, resources, and information, is the Accelerate SC areas of emphasis. And so I am telling, as a part of KIC staff, my staff, that they're going to coordinate with the state agencies and the local organizations to make sure that we integrate fully with what the state is doing. And I'm going to use the Carlos model. I don't have time to research all this stuff. I wish I did, but I don't. So I'm going to assign individual people that responsibility, and I want to show you how that looks. The state coordinating agency for this one response is the Department of Commerce. Well, the county counterpart is going to be Ray Farley. It's going to be Ray Farley's responsibility to stay coordinated with them and to also assist our local agencies, SC Work Links and our chambers of commerce, so that we know we're taking full advantage of that. For protection, DHEC is the state coordinating agency as appointed by the governor. We want Denise Kwiatek and Mike Hayes and Lisa Bryant coordinating with them, and to also be coordinating with our health department, DSS, United Way, Meals on Wheels. So we want to keep the conversation, the communications going as the state rolls out their components. Governance is the executive office, myself, Scott Smith, and Lisa Bryant, and one of our local assisting agencies would be the school district on how we approach their state programs. Resources, the state coordinating agency is the Department of Administration, the budget office, and our county counterparts will be Ralph Garino, Pierce Womack, and again, I've put Director Salinas in there so that we can stay coordinated with them. With information, Department of Administration, our county counterparts will be Jamie Burns with our public relations, Allison Fowler and Miranda Mixon with PRT and marketing, EOC Public Information, Katie Corbin. She's actually full-time with the assessor's office, but she repurposed when y'all declared an emergency. And our COVID-19 hotline person, Kendall Black, who's our utility wrench. And then they'll have a supporting counterpart, the local library system. So the whole point of all this, and it might sound a little confusing, but I want somebody who is accountable for coordinating with one part of the state response. So they can be fully educated, they can keep me informed, and they'll know who it impacts locally. So that's the way we want to take Kickstart and coordinate it with Accelerate SC. Again, this is just going to be kind of our governance structure as we look at coming back out of this and kickstarting Pickens County as a whole. With that part done, this is a letter that you're going to receive from me, but it basically says we started the Kickstart COVID-19 response. We would like for you to consider some economic recovery possibilities. Some of these might be philosophically right in line with what you like to do, and some of them may be philosophically not in line. I want to tell you about just some of our ideas tonight and then give you more information. We're going to send you a lot more specific information over the coming few days so that you all can make the policy level decisions on what should county government do in this situation. All right, and I'll show you what those are. Might be hard to read, but number one is local business preferred purchasing policy. This is perhaps boring stuff, but our procurement code provides that a local business gets a 3% benefit. So if you're a local business bidding on a local contract and you get within 3% of the low bid, the local preference kicks in and you get the bid. That's meant to spur our local business. So the local business preferred purchasing policy, we would offer to you all for consideration changing that from 3% to 5% to give a larger preference to local businesses. Again, that would be a policy decision that you all would need to make, but that's the first one. The CARES Act stimulus at the airport, I've already referenced this, and actually we've already taken many of these actions, but I would like for you all to consider it because the CARES Act is going to give us matching funds for the next step, the runway design step. Without getting into details we don't need to talk about too specifically, but about the expansion, we could do some engineering work, we could do some renovations, and that would also qualify for CARES Act funding. So I want you to be thinking about that as we move forward, and we'll send you more information. The third one is Tri-County Technical College Consortium approach. This is something that myself, the administrators in Anderson and Oconee, as well as the president at Tri-County, have been talking about with a couple of calls up to now. Tri-County Tech is looking at accessing CARES Act funding for job retraining and for job enabling training that would be funded by the CARES Act. What they would need from us is references of who needs the training. And there's two pools that we're thinking about. Ray Farley identified these two pools. One would be the small machine shops where the business is dried up, but they need to make sure they're up to snuff on their training and prepared. They're getting perhaps unemployment benefits for sitting at home right now. Let's try to educate them that this is an opportunity for them to do further training. So that's one idea. The idea of the consortium is individually the counties might not qualify because we might not be able to get to threshold numbers of jobs, like 30 jobs, 40 jobs. But if we all agree to cooperate, then perhaps we can. And so Tri-County Tech has agreed to be the kind of coordinating agency for that if the 3 counties will agree. The second group of workers would be those workers who are from restaurant industry, service industry, and they want to receive some kind of training for maybe the next job. They want to train for something that's more technical. They're receiving unemployment benefits now. Let's let that be an opportunity for them to receive that training. So that's one idea that Tri-County Technical has. Supporting and promoting Pickens County small businesses. As we talk about this a little bit, it's an idea, again, where one, our ordinance for Alliance Pickens does not mention chambers of commerce. It's more big business oriented. We want you to consider whether it's good policy for us to have a Chamber of Commerce representative on the Alliance Pickens board or not. We just want you to think about that, because it seems like coordinating Alliance Pickens with small business is something that needs to be not just a policy, but a design. So we want you to think about that. Also, as a part of this, a small business retention grant, the possibilities of splitting funds between the 4 chambers for them to then pay to small businesses that have suffered because of COVID-19. We, as a county, don't want to pick winners and losers, but we could make funds available to chambers of commerce if they would set up suitable programs. Eligible expenses would be for rent, mortgage, employee support, utilities, marketing, things like that. It's a grant we could set up. We could come up with the rules. We want you to at least consider it, though. Promote the Bailey Bill, which you might not know it as the Bailey Bill. I didn't until I researched it. We have versions of the Bailey Bill, the Textile Revitalization Act, the Historic Properties Revitalization Act. Y'all all have experience doing those very things. Should we start marketing those as economic development opportunities to try to spur the local economy? And then the other thing under supporting and promoting Pickens County small business is we would like for you all to consider going live with a new tourism-specific social media channels. We have been trying to gather some social media channels to market our local businesses, but we've been holding those back jealously, waiting for the new marketing study to come out. We didn't want to roll out some new channels and then the marketing study come out with totally different information. So we might ask for a little bit of forgiveness if y'all think that's an idea, and go ahead and start promoting those local businesses through those channels before our marketing study is concluded. Another idea that we had was a road improvement incentive. This is just an idea, and I'm not sure whether this is a good idea. You gentlemen will be able to tell me as you think about this, would it be a good idea or not. This year, we're going to do an incredible. We're going to do a large amount of paving. And that's because we had money in the bank in the road user fee account, because we hadn't paved over the last couple of years. Well, would it be a good idea for the council to pass a referendum and say the road user fee has to be expended up to some reasonable amount, 90%, every year as it's collected? Would that be a good way to get that money on the road quicker? And is that something you want to do? Or any alternative, would you rather say, no, it might be there might be appropriate times for us to bank that money? Anyway, the idea we had and the thing we would like for you to consider is, would that be a good way to put some folks to work here locally and to guarantee that that money is going to be put on the street literally each year? A couple more of these just as ideas, and again, we'll send you this in a much more formal format. Small Business Incentive Fund. This takes a little bit of explanation, and I appreciate y'all being patient with me. Every year, something terrible happens. Someone loses their property or their house at a tax sale. Now, when we sell their property at a tax sale, people get in this room and they bid on it. And let's say, for example, that it was my house and I owed $1,000 taxes, but the bid was for $10,000. The county doesn't get to keep the $10,000. We keep the $1,000. We pay the taxes. The other $9,000 goes into an account, and I can come and claim it. It was my house that got sold. I should claim the overage, right? Well, if I don't claim that overage after several years, it's either 4 or 5. I didn't make that note. 5? 5. Thank you, Ralph. Ralph knows this number well. If I don't claim it, it goes into our general fund. Okay, so that money then goes into our general fund. It's not specifically earmarked for anything, but it happened, it got in that general fund because something terrible happened. So the idea that staff came back with is, could we take that something terrible into something good? Could we use it to reinvest in the local economy? And when I was talking about the small business fund earlier, this could be one way to fund it. Just as a point of knowledge, the amount put into that account the last years that it was available, these are 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011 tax sales, because it's got to wait the 5 years. In 2011, $53,000 went into that account. In 2012, $27,000 went into that account. In 2013, $72,000, and in 2014, $84,000. So we're not talking about small money. Could we take that something terrible money and turn it into an incentive that we could offer to help the local economy so it doesn't happen so often in the future? That's the idea there. Workforce development, it may be that you like the Tri-County Tech idea, but it may be that you want a and also idea, or you may want an or instead of the Tri-County Tech idea. And that would be workforce development we did here locally. Could we find a way to fund, and there is a way to fund, and I'll explain that. It also involves delinquent tax. If they sell my house at the delinquent tax sale and nobody bids on it, an entity called the Forfeited Land Commission bids on it. That entity, the Forfeited Land Commission, is the treasurer, the auditor, and the register of deeds. And they bid what the taxes are. So it goes to the FLC, that's what we call it, FLC. Well, the FLC then sells it under whatever terms are best for the FLC. And year after year, we make money off that process. I mean, it's not a great amount of money, it's not as much as the overages, but some years we make more than others. Could we create a fund that helped pay for us to do job retraining locally? The money got into that account because something terrible happened. Can we find out a way to make it something good? Order of magnitude, you're talking about $10,000 or $20,000 perhaps a year, maybe more, that would come in through the Forfeited Land Commission that we would then have been able to put back out on the street in some kind of job training program. It could be something we do through Alliance Pickens in the School District of Pickens County under existing infrastructure we already have in place. But I wanted you to consider that, particularly as it relates to small businesses. If these things seem philosophically okay with you, we can develop the actual grant requirements as you all see fit. And then finally, I would say accelerate the schedule of branding and marketing plan. If you will recall, we use 30% ATAX money that has to be used for marketing, and we used it this year only to fund a marketing study. And that study was supposed to look at where would tourists be attracted? How could we attract them more? What should our brand be? It's beyond just a logo. I've seen some social media indication that we're spending $30,000 for a logo. It's something much more intense than that. It's aimed, in fact, to figure out how do we protect what's unique about Pickens County and still attract tourism. That's what the idea is. You all should have received a link to put in your input into that process. If you haven't, let me know. I want to make sure you have that opportunity. But the idea that we initially had was the tourism marketing aspect would come in future ATAX years. So this year, this 2020 and 2021, we're paying for the study. We'll look at ATAX money in 2022 to pay for putting out the signs, rebranding, advertisements to drive the brand. Should we not instead, to try to take this opportunity to market Pickens County, should we not accelerate that and look at spending some money from the general fund to rebrand new signs on all of our county locations, those sorts of things, new advertising campaigns? So that's the idea there. Again, these are just a series of ideas. I don't want you to think that this is an exhaustive list. It is not. It may not be it may not be the best ideas. I'm hoping this serves just to kind of spur your imagination. You may have better ideas than staff has come up with in the last week to 10 days. But regardless, Kickstart Pickens County is going to be what we do with local government, but it's also going to be what you deem appropriate with local business. So that's what I have for you tonight on the COVID-19 update. Be glad to answer any questions. Again, this is just a general overview of where we're headed with that.
Can the Kickstart program be accelerated versus de-accelerated?
What you're asking is, could you?
Can we do this faster if things? I mean, I hear you saying, well, if it gets worse, we can back it out. Is it possible to speed it up? Or are we locked into dates? that as things progress and we find out more and more about this, and, you know, it really hasn't hit our county in this astronomical way, but yet we're all forced to be in a shutdown. For example, I know I go past that Madden Bridge Park. It's closed.
It's closed.
But there's cars parked all along the side there.
Yeah,
So now we've created kind of a traffic hazard, but that park itself is unmanned.
Right.
And yet people there are going to be socially distanced, but, you know, our policy is we close all the parks. I guess my point is there some flexibility in moving this thing forward quicker, maybe saying, well, since no one's there, why do we have that closed?
Right.
You know, and as we're opening up boat ramps and things like that, I've seen cars pull off the side of the road all over the place now because they can't go to a park. And they're doing the same thing. It's just now they're potentially making a traffic hazard. That's my one point. My other is, is there room to go quicker as we see things maybe improve faster than we think?
Yeah, so the simple answer to your question is yes, there is room to do that. I'll tell you what my philosophy up to now has been, and I'll self-report. I went to Lowe's in Central. I went past the park you're talking about to get there, and I noticed 2 cars on the other side of the road, right? They're parking on the other side because our parking lot is closed off. So is it possible? Yes. My philosophy up to now has been to follow the governor's guidance. So when the governor would say the ramp needs to be closed, we weren't under a legal obligation to close our Mile Creek ramp. I just said, no, we're following that direction from Columbia. We're going to assume, and maybe this is a bad assumption, that he's got access to better data than we do. And so that's been the philosophy up to now. The phased out approach and the 2 weeks aspect of it is continuing to follow the governor's guidance. And that may be something y'all have strong feelings about, but I'll just tell you that that's been my philosophy up to now.
Well, and I appreciate that. I know, you know, the governor's trying to do the right thing. There are states that are looking at opening up by counties.
Right.
Based as different populations. I mean, you know, Greenville is a higher density than we are. And I hope our governor will follow that model a little bit and give us a little flexibility.
Right.
That's my only point.
I understand.
Vice Chairman Bowden.
I'm just in my Zoom meeting, I'm sitting here with my hand up, and I'm like, he can't see me. First, I want to say thank you. This is exactly what I was talking about
Good.
last week. Thank you. I did have a question, and I hate to get in the weeds here, but I'm going to. You jumped there, so I'm going with you. When we talk about parks, I think about swings and slides and
Right.
playground equipment and things that you touch and picnic shelters, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not, and sadly, I've been to Madden Bridge once, I think, maybe twice, I don't know. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's got park in the name, so we assume it needs to be closed because it has park in the name. Is there any reason it's an unmanned place? If there's a parking lot, and I think about places that I've passed that are manned or unmanned, like the Doodle Park on the Easley side, you can't mess with the playground equipment. They've got the orange fencing that's used for construction sites.
That's right.
Wrapped around the playground equipment because people, when they had it roped off, were still playing.
Right.
So they literally have wrapped it. But the parking lot itself is open. Are we looking at it more than just face value, calling it a park? You know, if it's something that would alleviate, if people are going to get out of the car and hike down a trail or use the kayak launch or whatever it may be.
They're gonna go anyway, is what you're saying.
Right, and it's not, they're not social interacting, it's distancing to its fullest. So are we looking
Right.
at it more than face value when it comes to parks?
Yeah, probably not. I'll just be honest about that. And the reason that Madden Bridge Park is closed is because Madden Bridge Park is a kayak ramp with a handrail, a small lookout pier. It's supposed to be a fishing pier, but the river had different ideas. The river moved, you can't fish from there. And then a picnic shelter with one picnic table under it. And so that park is kind of a unique situation. Its sister park, which is Katichi Beach, is more elaborate. It would handle a lot more people. I think what happened there is just our PRT department and me signing off on it. We said parks are parks, close them. Governor said close them. But can we look at maybe breaking the phases down into, well, this is harmless. I mean, we opened a boat ramp.
Yeah, that was the boat ramp,
that
actually,
would-
when I think about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can certainly look at that.
One thing, yesterday, I went up to Twin Falls and looked at that. I thought about going there, but it says closed. But there were people parking all over the place up there, and I'm sure they were hopping around the fence. And after that, went to Nine Times Heritage Preserve, unmanned parking there, open. You know, people wanna go hike, go to Nine Times.
Yeah. We've seen it at Sassafras. So the gate that we put in at Sassafras for inclement weather, we didn't really think about it in terms of this situation at all. It didn't occur to me to close it. But DNR sent us a message when the governor announced everything was closed and said, we're closing the gate to Sassafras. So I understand why they did that, because the governor ordered them to close down everything where people could congregate. But the situation you're referring to is exactly what happened. People are now stacking up, wadding up, as we said in Liberty, wadding up right there at the gate and trying to hike up through there. So there's a lot of unintended consequences here for things like that. Again, no request for action tonight. I just wanted to give you that update so you would all be reassured that we are approaching this in a systematic way, and we're going to give you some options to consider as the policymakers.
I think it's well thought out.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll give you what you need.
Good job, Mr. Roper.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our next item. This is the public hearing first on ordinance number 582 to provide for adoption of a budget amendment containing estimates of revenue expenditure changes for Pickens County for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019. You're freaking me out. Okay, I didn't know what you were doing. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody for public hearing?
Mr. Chairman and members of council, there are no public hearing comments regarding ordinance number 582.
All right, I just want to make sure that we put in here that we put out both public hearing guidelines for both this ordinance and the next one that were scheduled for tonight, ways for people to call in, to mail in, to email in, just so that we could get those, make sure that everybody's voice was heard. So seeing no public hearing, for the second reading of that ordinance, I'll close that. And I'll now ask for a motion and a second on a second reading of ordinance number 582 to provide for the adoption of a budget amendment containing estimates of revenue and expenditure changes for Pickens County for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020. Motion by Councilman Feimster. Second by Councilman Hendricks. Any discussion on that? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. That motion carries. Now we'll go into ordinance number 583, which is to provide for the levy of taxes in Pickens County for ordinary county purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021, and to direct expenditure thereof. I'll go ahead and gavel us into public hearing. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone for public hearing for the reading?
Mr. Chairman and members of council, we have one public hearing comment for ordinance number 583.
Okay.
Message. New messages. Message 1.
I just wanted the council to know that I am very pleased. There is no tax increase included in the budget at this time, and I hope that that will be the case for the next time as well, and I hope they move any discussions of any tax raises in the future off the agenda. This is Johnny L. Raines, Conservatives of the Upstate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of council, this concludes the public hearing comments for ordinance number 583.
All right, thanks. So we'll call that public hearing closed. And I'll ask for a motion and a second before we go into any discussion on the reading of ordinance number 583 to provide for the levy of taxes in Pickens County for ordinary county purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021, and to direct expenditure thereof.
Make a motion.
Motion by Councilman Hudson, second by Vice Chairman Bowers. And now we'll open it up for discussion. So, Mike, let me do this. I have a couple things that I want to discuss before we take a vote on the second on the second reading. I went back and I was talking to Ken and actually sent him a note specifically about our meeting on, oh my goodness, I had it right in front of me and now I've moved it. Our meeting on March 16th. This is when we first started talking about the budget, and basically what happened in that meeting, I made a motion that we keep the budget flat with no fee or tax increase, with the intent of basically looking at everything as it was from 2019-20, just keep it flat 2020-21. And then we went into a real long discussion. I made a mistake, and actually our attorney, Mr. Hendricks, had said, do we need a second on that? And I said, at that point, I was kind of unsure, so I never asked for a second, and we never actually took a vote on anything. So we never gave any other specific direction to staff other than a 30-minute conversation. I wanted to open it up to you guys specifically, because I mean, I'm good either way. But my intent was that we were keeping it flat, and then if there was anything else that we could see where we could save money or something specific where we had to do, then that would be added later. That's how I understood it, but I'm afraid that that's not what the message that came across to everybody. So I wanted to get y'all's opinion on that.
I would say, I agree with you. I don't think we need to be doing any big expenditures right now because we don't know what the economy is going to do. And I'm very concerned about that. Very concerned because the country's not being opened up. And I understand we have, it's for a health reason, but I believe personally, and I've heard some economists talk about this, the damage to the economy can be worse than the virus. And I don't think we should be buying any big ticket items whatsoever until we know what our economy is going to do. And I agree with Ralph. I mean, I have great hopes and we've got a great economy, but we don't know what we don't know. And we don't know if in the winter time we have a second round of this coronavirus 19. And so I'm with you. I don't think we should be doing anything big ticket items.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
Just for clarification, because I'm kind of confused, I'm going to shoot you straight.
Okay.
We had a 30-minute conversation, and I thought we were all in agreement that
Right.
we don't want to do anything fancy or new, and in fact, we may find inefficiencies to this process to be more efficient and may even be able to save money.
Right.
That was part of the conversation. So,
Right.
what are we doing?
Well, the budget that was presented to us, and I'm going to turn this over once he hears from all of us.
Okay.
But the budget that was presented to us had a lot of things. Here were all the requests, and here's all the things we want to grant.
Okay.
And here's all the other things that we want to do. So it was kind of a mishmash of, I thought we were going flat. I mean, they kept the budget to where it wasn't a tax increase.
Money-wise, we went flat. But
Right, money-wise, we're flat. So is it flat money-wise that we're looking at, and let's move stuff around? Or is it, nope, let's do it flat, and then let's us decide, add this, where were the efficiencies that you found, that kind of thing. Okay. I thought we were going one direction, and I believe, after a conversation I had with Mr. Roper, that there was a little bit of miscommunication there, and we never finished the form of creating a motion or voting on it, to actually have it in writing. So
right, and I remember that conversation. Yeah. I remember there was some conversation about the motion and second, and we determined no. I mean, we understand, we hear you loud and clear, I think is actually what was said.
Right.
And I understand now. There was some confusion. I will say, since I'm on the same page with you now. Man, I just finished my first cup of coffee. I'm on the same page with you.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. This is exactly what I expected, because while I agree 100%, Councilman Hudson, and we all echoed this, you have no idea what the economy's going to do. There's certain things we have to do. You know, if you don't change the oil in your car, you're not going to have a car. If you don't keep the tires rotating, you're not going to be able to drive because you're going to wear. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. There's certain minimal things you have to do, So this is what I expected. Now, whether or not I agree with the minimal list that was provided, that's up for discussion, and we did that last week, and we'll continue that here in a little while, and hopefully we'll do it again, because that's the only way, and which kind of is to the same point you're saying, you know, this is the list, and we want to whatever. So I think somewhere in between, don't do anything, and this is the administration's dream plan, is where we're going to need to fall, and I think, I understood that's where we were anyway.
One thing that
Councilman Henry.
I have is some specific questions when the time is right for Mr. Smith and Mr. Marino regarding a couple of things when we're ready to discuss specifics. But it's like Mr. Bauer is saying, essential services we have to continue with regardless of circumstances. There's some of the things that are needed by essential services that we do need, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about when you guys are ready to get into specifics.
One of the things that I see in government, the government gets most of its money halfway through the year. Doesn't get much the first half, and then you get a lot of it at the end of the year and the next couple of months. I'd like for us to hold off on most of our capital expenditures until the majority of the money's come in, so we'll know that we haven't overspent.
I think that Inslee, Councilman Finger makes a good point that we talked about last time, that, you know, we've got $2 million in capital expense. And it's everyone's guess as to what's gonna happen, how fast. Some people are saying 3 months, some people are saying 2 years. That we don't spend this money until we know that we're seeing the economy come back. I think $2 million of capital expense, I know it's all stuff we need. And at some point, we have to turn that over to the judgment of our administrator and our finance director, because they're dealing with the day-to-day operations, we're not. You know, and you got a rollover or a roll-off truck that it's dead. We can't pick up the stuff from the recycling centers without it. You know, that becomes an absolute point then. But I think at least I feel the general feel of council is that we're all unsure about where the economy's going. And ultimately the taxpayer is going to be footing the bill for all this. And we don't know how many businesses are going to go bankrupt and how much tax revenue is going to fall off because of that. And so I think we're all just very cautious, and I get exactly what Mr. Costner's saying, is that we need to take a very cautious approach. And even whatever we come up with this budget, we want it to be very clear to you that we're asking you to hang on to cash as long as you can before you start spending it, till we can start getting a feel of when this economy is going to get on its feet. With the oil prices dropping as much as they have, that's an impact that I don't think even the coronavirus is responsible for. It's causing extended problems when you have a negative oil price. That's a crazy thing that's never happened in the economy. So we're in uncharted territory. And I think that's kind of the feeling. We're all very uneasy about where it's going to go. So I guess my point is, whatever we come up with, you need to hold back as absolute much as you can before we start spending, even if we've approved it in a budget. Does that, and I'd like that to be conveyed to all those managers, that we don't know. We base a budget on what we think is going to happen. We make assumptions. You made assumptions that we're going to have a certain amount of income.
How are the tax collections so far, especially during the C-19 period? How's that looking as far as revenue coming in?
For the current, now, we'll get April next week, so I'll have that, and most of all your current taxes have already been paid through March 16th. It's more of the delinquent taxes, and actually vehicle taxes are coming in a little higher than what we projected on the local sales tax. Here again, I've not seen any of these numbers yet, so I can't really comment on that. But right now, through March, they're in line with what we expected.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
One point I'd like to make, and I'm guilty of this, like most of us, we don't talk about the good enough. A lot of people don't talk about the good enough. We know things because we know them, because we've learned them, but we don't ever share them because we don't think about them. And I know one thing, and I've heard department heads, I've heard elected officials get mad at that man over there because he won't let them spend money till close to the end of the budget cycle. And I know that, and I guess I knew that going in there, and I assumed that this year would be any different, which is shame on me, because I assumed, and I did not say that, and I know Mr. Roper, I don't think has said we're gonna wait, but that is a valid point, but I think that's something we do anyway. And Mr. Marino does a good job of that. He's very conservative with our numbers, to the point, like I said, that he makes people mad a lot. He has a rep for doing that. Secondly, I do want to ask, do we need to make a motion for better direction?
Actually, I was gonna ask Mr. Roper, what do you need from us so that you have a clear indication of a pathway forward?
Well, I would say, number one, thank you for the discussion. This is edifying, but I don't need anything. We delivered the staff budget to you.
It's already delivered.
It's now on you to express your direct philosophy through the second and the third. And I want to stress to you that we have a staff proposed budget, but we do not have a position. You gentlemen make that decision. So we stand waiting for your guidance in the second and third reading of the budget.
Mr. Coster,
Yes, sir.
I guess maybe I'm the most adamant about this, I don't know. I believe we ought to be looking at this budget like we'd look at our personal budget. If both the husband and wife had lost their jobs and we had planned on buying a new car, would we buy that new car? No, we wouldn't. We would drive what we had and we'd make that do. That is one of these times. This is one of those times that if our current capital assets, if they will suffice, this is one of those times we need to do that, because the citizens are not just across Pickens County, but across the country are doing this. And if the citizens can tighten their belt and make do, we can too. Now, the difference would be if there's a fire truck out there that is absolutely not serviceable, I understand it. But if those fire trucks meet the regulations, I just, where it's any kind of big capital asset, I think if they will, or they are serviceable and will do the job, I don't think we need to be looking at that this year at all. Because we're asking our citizens to do the same thing. There's a lot of people, small businesses are going to be closing. People don't have jobs. And I just think the citizens are not going to look very well on that. I'm not running for office this time, so this is not a political thing with me, but I am a citizen. And I think we need to be looking at those kind of things.
All right, can I ask just a question? Just
Sure.
If we were to decide to put off any capital, because I'm sure there's something in that list that we probably really
Actually,
have to
I
have.
was gonna, I don't want to interrupt you. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just saying, I'm sure there's things in that list that we absolutely have to have. I'm sure there's things in that list we could put off for a year. If you had to put off for a year. If for some reason the economy bounces back in 2 months and first of next year things are looking better than forecasted, all it would take is a budget amendment to add it back, right?
Right.
You can do that at any moment. In fact, we did one tonight, didn't we?
Yeah, well, we're doing budget amendments now for the,
What would take is council action directing us to do it, then we clean up the budget.
And it would come out of general funds
would come
because we
out-
would have more funds in general funds.
Because you did better than you anticipated.
right.
But then that brings up my next question. I realize your income numbers are guesstimates because you really don't know, because we don't know what the economy is going to do. Your income numbers are guesstimates. I guess that's where I'm at with accounting.
Well, part of the income is, part of it's come in for this, as we are finishing up this fiscal year, right? But
I think I actually answered my own question. Part of your capital expenses are coming out of the general fund anyway, right? Okay, so that answers my question. Yeah.
And as far as you're talking about with Mr. Byers on this list of things, see some of them get cut out, what would be the priority list on how would that rank as far as reintroducing these items to be purchased should the economy rebound?
I would say, Councilman You can hear, but the folks watching at home can't hear, so I apologize. What I was saying is, we don't have a priority internal to that. You know, we have the staff recommended budget that's passed first reading. If you all wanted us to come back and rank those capital purchases by order or something, we could do that, probably have that ready for you here in just a few days, if that's the way you want it to go.
And I think about Councilman Hendrick's situation with, I know one of your fire departments, if not both, had a truck that wouldn't run, had a truck that they couldn't repair, and they bought 2 new trucks. That was last year. Was it Pickens rule and maybe Croswell? I don't remember, but I remember we had 2 old, bad, wore-out trucks that we couldn't keep on the road for anything. See, to me, that's not a want. That's a need. When you can't get a fire engine to a fire,
And
you got a problem.
I'll go ahead and tell you, I visited the vineyards Friday, visited with them, and I looked at their service truck, and Mr. Smith, you can elaborate on it. It's got pan upon pan on the floor right there. It's leaking oil like crazy. Said it costs too doggone much to fix. And then looking at the economic side of it, as far as that. Are you okay for me to ask these guys to explain the funding of that now, or what you want to do?
Sure. I mean, we can ask any questions you want to. You ask your question, and then I guess what I'm going to suggest, Mr. Roper, is that we kind of go through. We've seen what you guys have recommended. Some of us had submitted questions, and we can go through some of those questions as it relates to those answers. And then if there's anything else specific over here that you guys want to ask about, whether it's from capital requests or position, I guess use of fund balance, then we can talk about that. So yes, sir, go ahead.
All right, my question is, and this is regarding the Vineyards Fire Station. They had requests 2 fire trucks. One was recommended by staff, one was not. I'd like confirm, yes, the service truck is definitely a need, correct, as bad as it is. And they won't take the box off of that and put it on the chassis of the other one. I understand that. The funding behind that service truck, they're gonna have one rolling off. Now, what is the recommended funding for that particular service truck? For that? Geo bond for that. Would that replace the one that they're paying on now? Or is that a different one?
No, remember we did the one for the current.
You're probably going to have to come up here to talk because nobody's going to hear
We
you.
have to have some cash flow answers, so.
Y'all just pull a couple chairs up there and that'd probably make it easier.
Stay 6 feet apart, please.
Yeah.
From what I recall, this is where council, we didn't put anything in the budget because we're looking at consolidating all the revenues from the fire districts. The Vineyards came back when they had a board and said that they wanted to go ahead and buy it, excuse me, and they would pay it off within 3 years. So we've already made the first payment. We have 2 more years to pay on that, being 20 and 21, I believe. And now this service truck would be issued with another GEO bond. By the time we issue the GEO bond, get the trucks in, the first payment wouldn't be due until 2022. So that's not in the current year budget. It'd be in the 2022 budget as far as the debt service payment. And then we would raise taxes in 2022 for the Vineyards.
For that service truck?
Correct, just that one service truck.
And the amount that would be raised would be what, in your estimation?
I don't even think I've calculated what that would be. It's
a few dollars at max, maybe.
Yeah, it's not a whole bunch.
Now, here's another question, Mr. Greeno, elaborate on this, and talking with the residents up there. They're wanting to get another fire engine replaced, one that's like 2003 or something like that, and dealing with ISO and stuff like that. As you all know, you'd be a little proactive on the front end. You're going to save money on the back end with ISO ratings and things like that. What would it cost for them to go ahead, because there's a 400-day, right now, 400-day, 330, 400-day turnaround on getting a truck, as far as ordering it, building it, and things like that. Should that other fire engine come through with approval, what would be the funding mechanism for that?
It would have to be a GEO bond.
And what would be the cost of a citizen up there in that community?
I didn't even look at calculating that because that was something that Scott didn't recommend at the time, said it's not needed. But I mean, there's you could probably go through this whole list of what was requested and go through the whole list. And, you know, Central is wanting a fire truck, Shady Grove is wanting a fire truck, You could go through the list there, and they're all gonna say they want this is what they requested. So if you looked at just one, you'd probably have to look at each one in their request and say, are they needed?
I'm curious as to something. What does that have to do with the ISO rating, getting
As far
another
as,
truck?
my understanding is, talking with them, they need to have one, because the distance
Yeah.
from up there at Green and Gear Road to the far end of their community, the distance of that, and getting another engine, taking that old one, putting it inside the gate, closer to some of those houses, help their insurance rate.
Yeah,
Is that true? It'll,
I've got an updated.
Mr. Smith, is that true? It will fix their ISO rating?
Well, they've got a
It will
three they
lower
want to
it?
maintain.
It'll help to protect their ISO rating.
Will it lower it?
That would be,
If we don't do it, would it raise it?
there's some more development going on back in the back portion, extending past the vineyards on the.
So my experience of ISO ratings is you never get a straight answer from an ISO person.
Correct.
They will never, they'll say, it becomes a political ball to gamble around to say why we need or need this because of ISO, and ISO can totally say something opposite to what they said the day before. And it doesn't, it's.
A lot of the debate that we had when we went to consolidating all of the fireboards into one fireboard, and the reason we put the box system in, and a lot of the conversations was, you're gonna screw up our ISO rating. And I do believe that you guys did extraordinary work because it didn't hurt any ISO rating. Matter of fact, it made it better in a lot of places.
We've maintained separate ISO districts.
Right.
There is no other fire area when you start going back then to the upper end of the lake near the Jocassee Dam end. They're the last resort up there, and those citizens up there are very adamant about protecting their ISO, and they had the means to do what they need to do for the equipment they need to do that.
So do you want to make a motion?
I would like to include that in there because that's why.
Which one?
Sir,
What number?
that would be 33,521. It's on page 3.
So you're talking about the fire engine 1100?
1100, yes, sir.
For $500,000?
Yes, sir.
Can I mention one thing?
It would be, it's what, 2 years, let's see, when the other one rolls off, but adding that was to protect their ISO, and that's what those citizens are demanding up there.
Can I ask a question? You did not recommend that truck.
I didn't.
So tell me why.
The thought process was, they just ordered the new one. This is a 3-year bond, just put this truck off a year, so that we're not overlapped, there's not being overlapping. Of course, I had to defer to Mr. Garino as far as cash flow issue, to approve the.
So hold on a second, there's a motion to add this to our budget. Is there a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize he'd made the motion.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Is there a second? There's not a second.
So you guys aren't wanting to,
Well, if there's not a second, we can't bring it up for a vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, do we want to close out item 4 and go into our budget discussions, which is?
Well,
what I
it's
thought
actually the
was
same thing. It's
Yeah.
just on there so that the public would know.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're gonna ultimately vote for the second reading, but this was on the budget, so we
Okay.
can,
That's fine, no, I get it, I didn't know.
yeah. The only reason we put that on the agenda was just so the public would know we're gonna be talking about the budget.
So to the question about the different trucks you've gone through, and, we've talked about at some point having a overall vision, and that's why you had the position you do. And you're looking at what trucks are people needing or getting. You've evaluated all this, and this is your recommendation, and also with the recommendation of our maintenance, vehicle maintenance. I'm assuming they're involved in every decision involving any vehicle.
When it came to fire, the superintendent said he's gonna defer to Scott on that. I don't know if y'all had a discussion behind the scenes.
Mr. Smith, did you elaborate on your reasoning for that, the vineyards not to get that fire, not be recommended for that other fire truck?
Basically, it was to just basically put that request off another year, just so there would not be an overlap of the GO bond funding, because the new truck that they haven't received yet was a 3-year bond, and they actually have a bond that'll roll off, looks like April of 2023, that bond will roll off. That will free up. Ralph told me he's got an updated version of this debt payoff.
One of the things that community considers and they want is to keep their debt services the same right there, where they don't get in a bind where on down the road when it becomes a need, that they're between a rock and a hard place because they don't have that movement to do what they need to do.
Correct.
To get equipment.
Well, they can increase their debt service.
But only
millage, but not on their operational millage. But this was just looking at how we could accommodate these requests without any actual
But you're
fee
thinking
increase.
maybe next year, should things be okay, it is a possibility for the following year for this community.
That was my recommendation as we were going through the process. We would put that request off a year. That way that
So-
3-year
so-
bond would be paid off.
You're doing just what you were saying that you wanted to do, is not have overlapping, because it doesn't go off and the other one comes on, they overlap. By waiting a year, they don't overlap.
That was
What you're saying.
That was our.
That makes logical sense.
If I can't get my peers to go along with this year, I certainly hope you guys consider it for the following year to do that for this community.
I guess back to my other question is, when we're evaluating vehicles, I would think it'd be prudent that whoever's maintaining this, because it's not just the truck itself, it's the engine and all that kind of stuff, that they're involved in that decision. I know we do it with all the other vehicles.
Yeah, the rolling stock, we have the vehicle
Right.
maintenance superintendent. He's the one that actually made the recommendation that you have out there, and then he said.
For all
he-
the other vehicles,
Right,
right.
and he said he would defer to Scott on the fire equipment.
What I would like to see is them work together on that, because
Yeah.
Scott's not gonna know the mechanics of because some of these trucks that may have been 2003 may be in great shape as far as mileage,
Right,
but their equipment may suck.
right.
Or they may be great equipment, but their mileage is terrible. And I think having the two of y'all work,
We did have those conversations, Tony and I did have those conversations as we were going through this list of requests. So what you see as a recommended, actually had his recommendation on top of it.
Is Tony changing oil and that kind of stuff on fire engines? I know every firehouse in the world's a little different, every fire station a little different. Some, the staff maintain the trucks and change their oil and this, that, and the other, and some places use vehicle maintenance. How do we do it in Pickens County?
The county
I don't know.
departments use vehicle maintenance.
Okay.
They roll through there on a.
So he would have
biannual
everything
basis.
documented.
Some of the municipalities actually change their own oil, but the county departments actually utilize vehicle maintenance, and it is documented.
So if you have a 1984 truck that's leaking a gallon a day, Tony would know that.
If it's been brought to his attention, I think he has had discussions on this service truck remount question.
So I saw the spreadsheet with the ambulance breakdown, and this truck needs a motor, this truck's been in and out of the shop, this truck hit a deer and it's taken us 3 months to fix. I think that's the kind of stuff you would like to see.
Correct.
Anytime they're making a recommendation to replace a piece of equipment, let's see what's up with our piece of equipment. Because one of them's actually got lower miles compared to the others, but it's been in and out of the shop nonstop.
Correct, that is correct. And part of the decision was a cash flow that I really couldn't answer that question based on their projected revenues and those kind of things. That wasn't something that I had access to. That's where Ralph and I had those discussions. So.
And I do want to make one point if I could. If council has any thoughts on the future when it comes to the fire districts and having consolidated revenues and maybe one uniform, whether it's fire fees or whether it's a millage countywide, you need to think about issuing long-term debt, because someone in this case, and I'll use the Vineyards because you brought that up, they may get the fire truck or 2 fire trucks for 2021, then we consolidate revenues for 2022 and it's under one umbrella. In the end, what's going to happen is the Vineyard's going to get two brand new fire trucks. You consolidate your revenues, all the other districts are going to end up paying for that debt when they have the new fire trucks. So I just want you to think about.
That would be if we have one district now. If we do 2 districts, take the millage districts, put them in one district they belong, and then take the others, is what it looks like for them.
But I think that's a discussion that full council will decide and not somebody individually.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I just want to point that out. If you're ever thinking about having consolidated revenue source for all the 13 fire districts, you need to think about being careful about issuing debt long-term. That's why 1 year, if you recall, we didn't recommend, or we recommended very little capital for the fire districts because we thought we were going in that direction. And we didn't want that to happen, to issue this debt. And then we consolidate the revenues. A district gets a brand new fire truck, and then everybody else pays for it over 7 or 10 years.
Well, I think in this particular case with this last GO bond, one of the things we had said is that if we do consolidate, they would carry the bond themselves. It would not be distributed to the rest of the county. That was one of our contingencies.
It was. Vice Chairman Bowles.
I
You change?
You're good.
Okay, fine.
I do have a question, not related to fire trucks.
Okay.
I was looking in tonight's packet, when I got here, there's a capital request packet, and then we have one that we had for last week's meeting that was a capital request packet. And the first thing that hit me was, there's not a Department 127 on last week, but there is on this week's.
Oh, wait a minute.
And I'm looking
I
at
can clarify that if you would like me
FY
to.
2020. I love it, because the recommended for tonight's is 4.8, where the recommended for
Yeah.
last week was 6.7.
If you look at your header, one of the questions that was in the email that was sent out from council, they wanted to be able to compare what was in the 2020 budget.
2020.
So
not
that is,
2021.
it looks exactly alike,
Dang.
except for the header is 2020, and then one's
Ralph,
2020.
I thought that you went and got your pencil so sharp, because I like this.
Did you like that one?
I like this.
Yeah, that was a question they couldn't compare to what's in the current year budget for capital, so I just took last year's sheet and put that in the
That was
Q&A.
okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I got excited.
All right, let's do this. I do have Mr. Renfro, are all the questions submitted on here, or no?
I think, I don't think everything is answered. We gave you what answers
no.
we had.
Well, what
Yeah,
I'm saying,
no,
but
so
all the
all the
questions-
questions we received, yes, are reflected.
Okay, so I want to go through those real quick, and then get you guys at least know what the questions are, and then get the responses that we can go over those responses and see what y'all want to do. So the first, oh my God, getting all this stuff together is driving me nuts here. Okay, the first question, did the EMS board come up with a budget proposal for each of the districts or a holistic approach for the county? If so, can we see the request along with the rationale behind the request? And the answer was, Scott Smith, each department head developed their individual budgets this year, presented their capital request to the Emergency Services Board, and the board ratified the request at the 310 meeting. So the EMS board said, yep, we agree with everything that's been presented.
And there's a typo in there. I just don't want there to be confusion. I think we all understand what you're talking about, but it says EMS board, not the Emergency Services Board, which would be,
What did I say?
you just transposed it. It's like emergency medical service. It just
Oh,
says
I'm
EMS.
sorry.
I think we all agree what you're talking about.
No,
just don't
I
want
didn't mean
that.
to say it that way.
Yeah.
That was just, in my head, I said it that way. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. It says here, Emergency Services Board. My fault. The next, one of the,
Just for clarification on that one, pretty much the chief said, hey, this is what we want. The Emergency Services Board said, we ain't got time to talk about this because we don't even have another meeting scheduled. We'll pass it through, and that's what we're seeing.
So what you're seeing is.
They didn't deliberate on it.
I don't know that they gave a great deal of deliberation. They were concerned with it, were the requests consistent with their overarching plan? And that was a determination they could make pretty easily.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't look like there was a lot.
Yeah, and keep it should not go without saying, and Mr. Chairman, I don't want to hijack your questions, but it should not go without saying that this is the first year under a new system in which we don't have the 13 fire boards weighing in with 13 different positions. This year, according to the ordinance you all passed, the county fire districts operate as an administrative division of the county. So Pumpkintown Fire District is on the county level, like the assessor's office or the sheriff's office or the delinquent tax office. It's an administrative arm of the county. So this is our first year going through that process, and I imagine that we're going to learn some things about better ways of doing it as we go through it. And this is an example he's already identified.
okay, thank you. The next question, which we don't have an answer to yet, but I'd like to hear what our economic development plan strategy is, not a recap of what we have done based on the funding information we had today. Is Mr. Farley gonna?
Mr. Farley actually emailed late today with a pretty intricate example of that. I'll send that to you all by email. It was later than when you and I were already here. I'll send that by email, and then we can work session that as needed.
All right, and then help me find this, because the next question was, what is the current structure and strategy plan for marketing, including how much money is allocated towards this?
Right, that's on the third page, I think, if you start at the beginning.
I have.
Yeah, you've got
Screwed up
more
my
paper than I do,
pages.
Mr. Chairman.
I know, I did it, I'm sorry. I don't know what that is too.
I just touched my face, I'm sure someone's going to tell me.
PRT, is that what it is?
Yep. I can give you kind of the rough answer to that from
Okay.
having talked with them, and that is a lot of what our marketing strategy is going to be contingent on the results of our marketing study. We brought in 2 new employees to that department after we had entered into the agreement with the Heritage Corridor to do this marketing study, and then immediately went into a natural disaster. So they are anxiously awaiting the results of that marketing study, which I believe all of us will spend great important time talking about how we implement.
When do we expect those results?
I actually talked with, or emailed with, Ms. McCollum with the Heritage Corridor today, and have been encouraging her and moving the step forward. Really, the next step is for you all's input. Normally, that would be done in a work session environment, but given where we are, that's the reason you got the link. But we're aiming for June to get the report back to you all.
Okay.
And I think it'll help answer a lot of those questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, what is the current structure and strategic plan for tourism, including how much money is allocated towards this? And that is under the funding breakdown, is that what I'm looking at?
Yes, yes, it's a comparison of 2 years, last year and, or current year and proposed year, is what that's breaking down on the bottom of page 4. Okay, I have something that I would like to propose to you guys. Is this a question? Okay, no. We have money allocated specifically for the museum. We have money allocated specifically for Haggard Mill, for Mile Creek. But yet the Performing Arts Center in Liberty is underneath the heading of tourism. I'd like to make a motion that we break that out. If we're going to treat, we need to treat them all the same. I mean, as far as being, they're all 501c3 organizations that were created with the hopes and opportunity that they would eventually become self-sustaining. Haggard Mill went down that road faster than anybody else. Right. However, the others, you know, the reason that we created it that way was so that the people who wanted to fund the museum, their money stayed with the museum because it went through that foundation. Same thing with the Performing Arts Center or with Haggard Mill or in Haggard Mill. But Performing Arts Center is not broken out separately. And the reason I asked the question as to why that was, and it's because we've always done it that way. That's right.
And because of the way that the Performing Arts Center was created with previous council.
It was created through the rec funds, and so it wasn't set up as a county department.
Right.
But when it became a 501c3, wasn't it?
Well, we still continued to do our part of that operation just through our normal tourism budget.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that, I don't know how I need to word this, but that it becomes a separate line item so that we can see what's going with the PC PAC and what's not. So that's, I don't know if I'm making it the right, that's my motion.
Correct?
It would be an amendment to second reading.
Yeah, an amendment to second reading that we
But
pull
you
out
break
PC
it out as a
PAC.
separate
I
county
would
department.
second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Clarification, is it gonna become its own new department or just simply a line item in the budget for the PC PAC?
I would like, as far as what I'm suggesting is that it be created or treated the same as the museum or.
Well, how are they treated? Are they a separate line?
Are they a separate line item?
If you want a separate line item, the only thing we're paying for the PAC right now is for utility bills. So if you want to create a separate department that says PAC and we put the utility bills under that, we can do that. Or if,
You just said separate department, and that was actually my question. Are we creating a new county department, or are we creating a new line item on the budget?
My request was to have the PAC treated the same as the museum or the other entities that we have. So how are they treated?
so if we can create a department that says PAC, and then we can take all the utility costs that's out of building maintenance and put it in that department.
Excuse me a second, because of the clarification, are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
okay
yeah.
with the
Yeah.
second still being in place?
Yeah, because we're discussing and we can amend it if we need
I
to.
wanna be clear.
I'm with you, and that was the first thing I was gonna ask, and you beat me to it. Is there any cost to this? Expansion of government, anything else? Or are we just saying, here, now we're gonna call this is you know, does every department has to have a head and
Yeah, so
and therefore
my
staff,
goal is
and then, you know, here we have all this.
Yeah, I see your point. My intent is not to create more government. My intent is to create more almost accountability so that we know where we're putting our money and what's our return on investment.
I see it as a transparency piece, I really do.
Yeah, that's
What do they need that don't have, or what's been lacking there?
well. So I'm not asking for anything for the PAC. I'm asking that it just be treated the same as the other entities that are part of the county.
Currently, we're not able to see how much money is being spent at the PAC on utility bills because it falls under tourism, is what Chairman Cotton, I believe, is saying.
But they're
Right.
not spending a wide on seats, no.
So it looks like our tourism department is spending more money.
The
than
wide on
we are.
seats was based on other funding, not on anything.
Not general
else.
fund, that was
They
ATAX.
received
Right, it's a different pot of money.
a lot of money.
Right, that was a different pot of money, though.
Still,
That's
they
not what-
received it.
We're not talking about part of the budget part of this. What I'm saying is, right now, the Performing Arts Center falls under tourism, so does tourism. So they're not the same thing.
So who runs the Pickens County Auditorium, PAC, whatever
So
that?
the Pickens County Performing Arts Center.
I can't say all that in
You
one
got-
breath.
you-
PAC.
PC PAC, that's what we call it, the PAC. The PAC is run by the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department.
Is there a person that's in
Allison-
charge of
Allison
that?
Fowler is in charge of that.
Is she in charge of booking everything there and creating all the, who does?
Well, up to this point, there really hasn't been any booking because we've been in this natural
Outside
disaster.
of, outside
But to
of,
the
but
side,
we've had this for a year or so now. So
Yeah.
who's been doing the,
So-
you know, I know that our former tourism director kind of ran that place,
that's right.
you know, and he did all the bookings. So is anyone, when she came in, was she taking over those bookings?
Yes, she did. And we've actually, some of those that we talked about tonight being rescheduled.
So
were
she's the
bookings that
one
he
kind
made
of in charge of it.
Of that department.
So
And then
she would-
s- but let me, I apologize to interrupt, but
No,
there's
no.
one clarification I want to make on that. In watching the way that office operates, actually, the marketing person, Miranda, is dealing most directly with the acts and scheduling the acts at the Performing Arts Center. But she reports to Allison, who's the head of that
Well,
department.
having a department begs for someone to be in charge of it. Doesn't mean you gotta create a new job, doesn't mean you gotta make a new title, but someone's gonna have a responsibility who's now accountable for the money spent there. Rather than just saying, well, now we have a department, but there's really nobody running it, just someone there in which place to put money. It would be, somebody would be held accountable to make sure it functions and runs
And what I would say there is I don't think that we have that person on the staff that would run that facility, other than saying that it's Allison Fowler's responsibility. She's gonna be ultimately responsible, just the way Jay Pitts was ultimately responsible. But creating as a separate department is going to, it's gonna be a frame under which we make decisions going forward. And I think that's the point you're making.
Well, and here's the, okay, you made me think of another point. So this county, the previous council had the vision to redo all that. This council had the vision to take it from a civic auditorium, which sounds like you're having a wrestling match, to a performing arts center.
What's wrong with wrestling?
Sounds like it's gonna be, nothing wrong with a wrestling match, but that's what it sounds like it's gonna be.
Wrestling.
Had the vision to take it to a different level, but if we don't have anybody that is in charge of it, then how are we gonna make sure we get a return on investment from all this money that's been put into the Performing Arts Center going down the road?
In my vision, I'd like to see it operated like a movie theater where you see the funds coming in and be able to see the funds going out. And that way, you know how it's doing, whether it's making a lot of money or whether we're having to support. I know you said we're supporting the utilities, and I'm wondering what would happen if they weren't bringing in any money.
Well, and what I would tell you, Mr. Feemster, you bring up a very important point in this conversation, and that is that the Performing Arts Center is not bringing in any money to the county. It's
Right.
bringing in some money that goes to the foundation. That's the way it's structured to work at this time, is that the bookings and the revenues from the bookings go to the foundation to help help them grow and where they can grow into more day-to-day management.
So should the foundation be the one booking everything and doing it, and then just accountable to a person that's overseeing it, in other words?
I think what you're describing is what the strategic goal of this council was when you created the 501c3s, is that they would be doing it, there would be a point person with the county, but the working foundation board would be running things. The Performing Arts Center, we would love for that to be a goal for the coming year, to get them built up to where they're able to do that, because that's what the Haygood Mill's doing. What you're talking about is what the Haygood Mill's doing.
Well, the
We would
Haygood
love
Mill
for
though
that.
is not, again, here's the problem.
Yeah.
Haygood Mill is not self-sustaining. We got $104,000 that's going into the budget to pay for Haygood Mill.
Well, but so if you create the department, to speak to your point, if you create the department, you can start thinking about it that way. Okay, how much are we gonna allocate to that foundation board?
That's, and that is my point. I'm not asking for any money for them yet, because right now they don't know if they're gonna be, when the shows are gonna happen. But what I'm saying is, if we're going to give them the tools they need to be successful, so that one day, whatever day that is, they become self-sustaining, then it needs to be treated as a separate entity. Otherwise, it all gets mishmashed inside of tourism, and you don't know
Right.
what we're doing.
So we have this department in which somebody's responsible to, but the 501c3 is the one that's supposed to be doing the bookings, and, because it seems like Jay Pitts was doing their job for them.
Well, he served a dual role. You have to remember, he was
Okay.
on the board and he was a tourism director.
Okay, so I think that we're now having to redefine a little bit about what their role
But
is.
here's your other problem. I don't think the people that we sat on that board think that they are supposed to do any work at all. Some of them are do now,
I
I
was
think.
gonna say, the last meeting I went to, they had the vision perfectly clear, and they were making great strides, and they had some big plans, but the Rona hit, and they had to get creative.
That's what I was gonna ask, is how's the board doing?
The last meeting I went to, and I just lost her name. You know the
Kim.
one? Kim.
Valentine.
Had kind of been voluntold in that chairmanship, and was running now. That was the same time, the transition. It was Jay's last meeting, right before Allison was hired, and like I said, that's where things kind of stagnated up a little bit, and then the Rona hit. But they had the vision, they had some great ideas, they had board members like thinking about things like that they should have a long time ago, but insurance and protecting their liabilities and protecting the county's liabilities. Of course, we have things covered, but as a board, they were thinking more like a true structured board. They had a full list of things, and part of that Roy B. helped with and Jay helped with, but they'd set them up in a great place. And then, like I say, things got stagnant, not because of the transition as much as, because I still get emails from the board, and this, that, and the other, but the problem really has been, there's nothing that they could, any momentum they had, they have now lost.
Right.
But they did see the vision of, okay, we're gonna be the ones that are gonna collect the money, therefore we are the ones that are gonna have to pay for these bookings. You know, we're not asking the county to pay, literally what they wanted from the county was keep the power on, help us transition, even to the point where they got with Mark Bryant and IT about getting a laptop that would work the county stuff, but then they could do other things, because when you're in the production world, Windows is not the best product out there. And you know, that's that when you're county government, Windows is the best product because you can like lock it down to the nth degree, you know. So dealing with things like that, where it's not really a county issue, but it's a way that the board has to interact with the county, they had done a good job of that. So I will say, I think that they had started down the right path. They're definitely not at the right path. They had started down the right path, but I will say the Rona has slowed any momentum down.
I think that's exactly right. There's, the goal that you all set for the 501c3s when you created them has gotten out of order by circumstance. The Performing Arts Center was, I think, really one that you were strong on to begin with, but then the Haygood Mill went out on its own, so to speak. So we're going to have to focus on these other two to figure out what the path forward is. And you're right, every bit of momentum, we had staff changeover and the coronavirus, boom, boom, 1, 2. So we're going to have to really focus on this entity as we move forward to get them up and running good.
Back to the motion that we have.
Yeah.
And I think what he's saying makes complete sense. They would just have a separate department with the tourism director, the head of that department. Okay, where it sounds like the board is actually doing their own
I'm
thing,
encouraged by that.
and they're going there, but it allows them a little more, a more of a structure. Is okay. Here's our money is coming from the county.
But know that in this department, and it's, you know, you make the fair point that there are other departments like this, that it's the way Hagen Mill operates, but it's only going to show money going out, because it's no money coming in.
Right.
Well, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, when I look at tourism, you know, last year's budget was 56,420. That's not actually an accurate number at all, because you've got, if, at a minimum, the utilities for the Performing Arts Center coming out of there as well. So we really didn't spend in the tourism department.
Exactly, that's my point.
It's a little bit unclear what we spent, because we spent electric bill instead of
Yes.
promoting tourism, but that's part of the,
We don't know exactly what we did spend on tourism, because within that department, it's got all these other things.
you got sunk costs that are wrapped into it.
I just, I want to make the point clear. I don't want to add any money to anything with the Performing Arts Center. My motion is specific to creating that department.
And just a point of clarification, Ms. Fowler's duties will still be overarching. That's a decision that I think y'all all supported from the beginning, is that tourism position need to be comprehensive in scope. They'll serve as the department head, be ultimately responsible for that department, but they're not going to be dedicated to just that department. That would be a step backwards.
She's just the person that's
Mr. Chairman.
She's the person to hold it responsible.
Yes, sir.
I'm fine with that, as long as we all are of one accord that we're pushing all these 501(c)(3)s to become self-sufficient. That's the thing.
Well,
We're
but see, I want to be able to,
all of
argue the
them that
point.
way.
If we're going to spend $104,000 for Hagen Mill, and we're going to spend how much for the museum, what's our return on investment on that? And it may be well worth it, right? I mean.
But you don't know on the PAC.
We don't know in the PAC, because we don't know we're not putting any money towards it right now.
If that's what
paper.
our ultimate goal is, I'm good with it.
Right.
But I want us to continue, and I hope the next year we continue to get pushing them to become self-sufficient, so that next year, when emergency services comes in and needs some money, we'll have that money.
Right. Now, what I don't want to get confused with is, and Ralph will back me up on this, some of the monies that we allocate for things like Hagen Mill or for the PAC come out of come out of accommodations tax.
I agree.
Come out of different funding, but at least this way it's completely separate, and we can see what's going into your point. Not expecting, because right now, how much money are we expecting to get from Hagen Mill? How much money are we going to get from Hagen Mill? Yeah.
We don't get anything.
Right, that's my point. So, okay, so same thing with the Performing Arts Center, and the museum. Are we collecting money from the museum?
We do collect some money.
But should it not be a part of the museum 501(c)(3)? That's, all I'm getting at is we should treat all of them the same and not come up with these separate rules or whatever for individual ones. They should all be treated the same way. I mean. That's fine.
Right.
Because we don't take the parking money in for the, for Haygood Mill, but we're taking snack money in from the museum. Or gift shop
Gift
money.
shop. You may need to still put.
I mean, it's like $20 a month, maybe.
Yeah, you're talking $2,000 or $3,000 a year.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
talking, yeah.
And for them to set up their own system, it may cost more than.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, then that.
But that would at
again,
least make
something-
That's an ROI, and looking at it from that standpoint. That's why we kind of continue to do it, but we give that money to the museum to spend. Whatever they bring in, they can spend.
Okay,
But it's very little amount of
We
money.
just do their accounting because they just can't. That makes
Got
total
it.
sense.
So, and go back to the original intent, that if people want to support any of these entities, their money stays within those entities.
And people may have contributed to the 501(c)(3) for the museum. That's not on our books anymore. We do get a little bit of sales at the gift shop, and we kind of keep up with that. But we don't know if a donation's going to the museum or the PAC or the Haygood Mill. That is completely separate books from our books. When you set up the 501(c)(3), that's where those donations can go
We just ask
to.
for the reports from them to tell us.
Right, right. Okay, so is there any other discussion on this this motion for amendment, and then we'll move on? All right, all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. That motion carries. Okay, so moving on, here we go. I see the SCBA listed in 3 places, one with 5 for $32,500, one with 6 for $52,170. and one for $34,240. What's the difference in price, and why wouldn't we buy 15 at X amount of dollars? And you gave us a response. I
There's
believe.
actually an answer to that question. It sounds unanswerable.
It does.
Why do you have the different ones at
So
different
it's-
price points?
They're different ones, and here's, I mean, Councilman, Vice Chairman Bowers might be able to help with this too, and I know Scott, that's y'all's world. So there's different apparatus. Why wouldn't we all be on the same type of apparatus?
That is what to answer your question, we would do a group purchase as a total.
That was the question, this is the best answer you could have given. I mean, that makes complete and total sense.
Because like Liberty currently uses Scott, we will convert them to MSA, but they would have to acquire additional resources, adapters, and they would have to convert their system over to MSA from Scott. There are only two departments in the county that uses something different. That's Central and Town and City of Liberty. So everybody else is on MSA.
And you're working towards getting everybody on the same.
We're working towards, the grant has been applied for, the AFG grant has been submitted. That application process has closed, so you usually won't start hearing back from that till probably August or September. Okay. But that wheel's in motion, so. And
Okay.
the thing with the grant, it won't replace all the air packs that are currently in the departments. It'll cover, basically, they say the seated positions. So that's, some of the departments will have to acquire a few additional ones just to switch their complete inventory over. We do have a couple of departments that they're gonna have to do something within the near future. And that's what you see there. They're working on getting converted over it and doing a slow process. So if the grant comes through, we'll be in great shape. And that would take care of those departments listed have to take care of their needs.
Okay, next question, I'm saying one more time. Don't go anywhere because it'll be real fast. But the next question was about the requested increase from Tri-County Technical College. Are we automatically required to pay that? Or what happens if we say no? We don't have an answer for that yet.
We don't. That'll be something we'll work session. Actually, you all got an email from me saying, Tri-County Tech normally has you over and does their budget request, and this year, because of obvious COVID concerns, they're not. So I sent you all an email asking, I guess through Megan, which of you and how do you want to review that request? I think Anderson County just accepted it as is without any further explanation. Oconee, they're still waiting to hear from. So we'll probably need to work session.
That's our 25, 50.
That's right.
Anderson pays 50, we pay 25%, and
That's right.
County pays 25%.
Well, so so it's an increase of how much?
$18,900.
Okay, which is what percentage, I guess is the question from what we normally get.
Yeah, math
That's
questions I can't help you with. I'm
That's
sorry.
kind of what we look at, is
Slink away.
how much more are you asking for and why?
Right.
And
is it operating and maintenance or is it capital? And there's different rules for that.
Right.
Right. All right, then going back, the other question was with regards to extrication tools. So projected for the vineyards for $34,360, and then extrication tools 3 for $32,100 requested and denied for Liberty. What's the rationale behind providing tools in one place and not in the other?
Right.
Do they have them or need them?
The case with Liberty, they've got an existing set that is starting to show some wear and tear, but they were actually going to purchase it with the new engine. It was new equipment to go on the new engine that was requested. It was not presented. It would require.
So it was a request to purchase with the engine.
Correct, and
Okay.
it would require a fee increase to.
And the extrication tools for the vineyards?
They wanted to buy it out of their current budget. We basically, they're going to use their cash reserve, their cash balance to purchase it out of next year's budget.
So one district could afford it, the other could not without
Without a fee.
Which is what this is to me a perfect example of creating the haves and the have-nots. Not a need, but they just want to have it.
Well, it is, the vineyards does have it is a justifiable need with their terrain that they've got. What they're looking at is a set of battery powered tools instead of carrying the hydraulic pump, the hoses, and then the individual tool. It's all included in one compact unit that they can get off the truck and go down into a ravine or up the side of the mountain or whatever they need to get to the.
One thing you talk about vineyards, and that's not necessarily budget related, but in a way it is. I would encourage you guys to go up there and visit with them and see some of the things that go on and why they have certain requests that they do. As Mr. Smith has alluded to, their geographic topography and things like that up
No,
there.
I
It's totally
get
different,
all
but
that. I'm not-
I
I'm-
recommend you guys visit with those guys.
I don't want you to
understanding
think I'm picking on the vineyards, and I don't want them to think that either. I'm just, these are the things that I noticed when I noticed that Liberty's asking for it and they're not getting it, but the vineyards are, so why? So it's a good reason why, because the terrain's different and because they need something battery versus the hydraulic, whatever. So that makes sense. I just want to make sure as we continue to work towards a holistic approach,
Yes, sir.
that's the vision that our council has, and that's where we're going.
And one thing, I have been up there numerous times, very familiar with it, so I would encourage you guys, because, you know, we're all part of one county.
Cool.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
Because it's not on here, but it's to that, I had a question
Go
about
ahead.
that, and actually last week. So, I noticed that they're wanting a Genesis, whatever brand. I know Hearst is out there everywhere. You have Hamatro is a brand that's out there. Is there a product that is in line with equipment we already use, where you have interchangeable parts, where you have, so my question is, and this is what I proposed to Mr. Guarino last week, was at what point do we start standardizing, like we're doing with the air packs? You don't know how tickled to death that makes me over the air packs. I mean, I'm being dead serious about that. So is there a product, and at what point do we start looking at, because I understand the battery operated versus, but if I like Fords and Carl's a big Dodge man, everybody, or Subaru man, everybody knows that. But I can't stand a Subaru. I'm not going to drive a Subaru. I'm going to drive a Ford. He's not going to drive a Ford. So, and I know that happens. Are we looking at that when we're looking at these requests?
We do, and predominantly we're between Hearst and Genesis and throughout the county right now. There may be one set of old Hamatro out there.
So have you decided which way you're going?
I have a preference.
Hard question.
I have a preference. But this being with the battery power tools, it doesn't have to coincide with a hydraulic set.
Unless
Still
you
needs
buy
some
another
support.
set next year for another department, then you need to make sure you're buying whatever. Unless Hearst is better than Genesis when it comes cutting power, battery life. I guess really what I'm asking, are we really looking to make sure we're getting the best product, best bang for the buck?
So why wouldn't we want battery powered in Liberty? Because they don't need it, because it costs more?
No, it kind of fits the same need. They do have a lot of, they do run a lot of rec calls on 123.
Yeah,
And
but I'm
there's
saying,
a lot of holes and-
but does it cost more,
But
or?
it depends on how many different components you have to buy. If you buy the whole set, if you have to buy the pump, the hoses, and the tool itself, the price is, and then you go with the 3-set tool of battery power, it's pretty comparable, really and truly. The battery's a little bit more, a little bit higher, but also we're looking at long range. With the Hearst, it's a proprietary battery that you have to purchase. It's their battery, so you're kind of locked into their system. The Genesis uses a Milwaukee battery, so you can go to the hardware store and get that for a lot cheaper.
All I can do is equate this to like weed eaters or something.
Seriously,
If you go to buy the battery, it'll have you buy the whole pack to get it. You gotta buy 5 different things.
Simplification,
Husqvarna
the
versus-
old style tools run on a Briggs & Stratton motor.
Okay.
All right. The tools we're talking about buying are your Ryobi 40-volt chainsaw that's just as strong, or lawnmower that's just as strong as that Briggs & Stratton motor. Yeah, it's true, you can't just throw gas in it and keep going. You gotta actually charge your battery, and if you don't have multiple batteries, you got downtime. But it's the exact same equivalent, going from old school Briggs motor to new school battery technology. I mean, that's what we're talking about doing. And ideally, we would put a set of battery, and this isn't a plug at all, but ideally, you'd put a set of battery powered tools on every truck, and you'd put a set of good old fashioned pump tools on every truck, and that way you got the convenience, but you got your backup. Because there's a lot of departments that do that. They have 2 sets of tools on their trucks, because you never know when that pump's going to
All I'm interested in is that we begin to
Standardize.
look for efficiencies and standardizing what we're buying so that it's easier.
And that was my question.
And we do look to see what our purchase power gives us too, where we're gonna get the most bang for our buck, whichever manufacturer unfortunately has the best incentives and best deal at that time, so that plays into it too. Because operational wise, they're pretty standard across the board between the different.
The battery thing's a big thing, though, as far as Milwaukee versus proprietary.
Yeah, that is. Maintenance wise.
In the next question, I see that you may have already answered this kind of from what Councilman White was saying, but it says, I see that we are awarding 9 vehicles to the sheriff's office where they were requesting 9, but we did make some changes to the request by denying some and adding others. What's the justification for those vehicles that we're replacing or adding? And of the replacing, what happens to those vehicles?
Yeah, so
Is that here?
and that's there, that answer's there. We asked most of the county departments to submit a 5-year plan. You know, that was one of your, as the chairman calls it, pillars. One of your 5 goals for the year, or 6 goals for the year, was to have a plan for capital expenditures. The sheriff's office didn't submit a vehicle request this year as part of their 5-year plan, but instead they talked to Tony Chastain about what should be replaced. They had some, I guess, requests they did informally in their budget submission, but he went solely off vehicle mileage in his records, demands of the vehicle, et cetera. That's what it says there. So all of the vehicles that are listed there will be replacements, meaning we're going to require them to surrender a vehicle in order to get a vehicle.
And where does that vehicle go?
Well, that vehicle's gonna go, I don't know that he gave you that information right here. You mean where does the vehicle go after it's surrendered?
Yeah.
Well, he says here that it's gonna be declared surplus and sold on gov deals unless we can find a better use for it somewhere else in the county.
He's gonna buy it.
I've never had luck.
No,
You never had any luck with it.
You like
But so
gov deals, though.
what I'm saying is, and I've actually talked to the sheriff about this and the chief deputy about this, is we're gonna encourage them to do more than that. I've got a list of the vehicles that aren't being driven that much. Ralph was able to pull those records for me several weeks back. So we're gonna do a 1-to-1 at a minimum, but I'm gonna try to encourage to get more vehicles out because we've got some vehicles that aren't moving. And one idea that we've got to talk to the sheriff about is, let's come up with a pool vehicle for when your car's in the maintenance shop. You know, we'll have a patrol car that stays at vehicle maintenance. That would be one way for us to get rid of extras, because some of their vehicles are extras because they're, that frontline patrol car is down for maintenance, so they need one to drive. Well, they've got them parked around the yard up there for that purpose, but what we would like to do is get them where they had one at vehicle maintenance that they checked out when they dropped off their vehicle.
Ken, have they looked at, I know they've went away from patrol vehicles like cars.
Right.
They went to SUVs. What's the difference between the price on an SUV versus a patrol car? Because I know back in the day, the Crown Vics, which I don't make anymore, was about $20-something thousand. The SUVs are what, 41?
43 looks like.
43.
I didn't know if Ralph might have that information, but if he doesn't, we'll get that back.
So my point is this: if they absolutely needed cars and the price is that much difference, could they not go to a police cruiser and save some money and maybe get some extra vehicles?
The difference has come a lot closer than when it used to be. You still pay a little bit more for the SUV type vehicle, but one of the other reasons why we went to the SUV, or the Sheriff's Department requested that, is because we have patrol people, deputies that are larger, and they couldn't fit into the quote Crown Vic style vehicles. Some of these guys are 6'4", 250 pounds, and you just can't get into the Crown Vics. But we did this several years ago when we had a demo out there.
But wasn't the resale value of SUV greater than the cruiser when they go to resell? Wasn't that brought up as well?
As long as we keep ours, we don't get a lot of resale value, and we haven't started selling the SUVs yet. The Crown Vics, we're getting about $2,000 a Crown Vic, because those are our older vehicles. They've pretty much all gone to SUVs, probably since 2 years ago, maybe.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
So, I understand your point 100%. The last 2 years I've asked the same question, literally the last 2 years to the sheriff, and both times, and I'm gonna give you his answer, and I believe it's partially true, watching gov deals like I do, it's partially true. You do have a higher resale with your Tahoes and your Explorers. In fact, some police departments are going away, and I'm not gonna say sheriff's office, but like City of Easley, if you'll notice, they've got a lot of new Tahoes out there. They're on a little different plan. They're doing leases, so they sell back. They don't do gov deals with them, but your SUVs bring more money than on resale. And if you watch gov deals, it is legitimately that way. You talked about larger staff members. It's not necessarily larger staff members as if you rode in a Crown Vic. Crown Vic's a big car. You put your cage and all that stuff in a Crown Vic, and the guy in the front seat had room. The guy in the back seat, not so much, because that's the room they took. Your new police cars, they are smaller cars. You pull a Ford Interceptor beside a Crown Vic, and it's a smaller car, or an Impala, or the Charger, or whatever. That plays into its size, but resale is the reason the sheriff gave us the last 2 years.
Right.
Well, I feel like the resale is important, but, and of course, I know we don't have a pursuit policy now, but, I think at high speed, to me, the police cruiser are always safer than a SUV, because the SUV is higher, center of gravity, that it would seem to me that, the cruiser, but I don't know, they may not make a good cruiser anymore, because Crown Vic was there for years. I know they used to make a Chevy Impala, but I don't know if they make that anymore. I was just wondering if it was something that they had looked at. Helping, you know, if you could get something that was a lot lower price range, it might allow them to get the cars they want for a less amount of money.
And I don't think, like you said, I would also remember there's maybe less than $5,000 difference
That's come down a lot
between
in the
a car
difference.
and a SUV.
We did look at that probably about 2 years ago. We went to the SUV, and maybe 3 years ago, but they did a comparison. Yes, the SUV was more expensive, but it wasn't significantly more efficient. I mean, cost more.
Okay.
And it's harder for drivers to distinguish the SUV when they're driving down the road too fast.
Do we have geo trackers on?
We have geo-trackers on a lot of our vehicles.
Do we have them on our police vehicles?
I don't believe we do.
We do not, because they're under elected officials.
Right.
But now a lot of our other.
Well, wait a minute, but the cars are, and my point being to find the cars, we can know the mileage, the service is on it, all that kind of stuff. We know where the car is, we know, if it's being idle, and service mileage on it. I mean, that's part of having that, right?
We don't have that with the sheriff's office vehicles. We do with some of our other departments.
Well, my question is, why not? Because who's in charge? Who's in charge of the vehicles?
Elected official.
Elected official.
Once he gets them, they're his.
Well, we maintain them, right? So couldn't be part of our maintenance program to have a geo tracker on them.
I think, and let me speak to this. There's a larger issue at play here that I don't know the sheriff would necessarily want us to be discussing, but it's an interesting question that triggers thoughts from my old life. If that was information.
Because you find cars that somehow don't have much mileage on them.
Well, now that we find, I'm talking about evidentiary.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. We do know that there's some of their vehicles that will get less than 2,000 miles on them in a year. So that vehicle, in my opinion, doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we can find that out when they get fuel or when they go to service.
No, we find it out when they get fuel. They enter their mileage, they get the fuel, we get the report. That's the way we find it out. When we get the service on the vehicles, we know there, because that creates a service record. So in terms of putting trackers on the sheriff's office vehicles, I think the sheriff would object for good criminal justice reasons. But we still have ways of gathering the data.
Yeah, I think we need to leave the trackers to the sheriff.
And he may or may not have them, we don't know.
Well, that's true.
All right, then. Any other questions on this? All right, the next question was basically, and Ralph, thank you for the giving us the question was, under capital request, it's difficult to remember what was requested, approved last year as compared to being requested, and you provided us with that report. Thank you. Then there's a question on the ambulances. Why are we budgeting for additional ambulances if we haven't spent the money from last year on the ambulances we approved for that budget cycle? We were told at the meeting we would probably get a refund, but wouldn't we simply just apply that money allocated, or are we asking for even more? And the answer is that we're asking for even more.
That's right.
There's a whole long reason.
It's a tortured history, but the answer is we're trying to get 4.
Yeah, and you need 4. Truthfully, the 2 that we haven't bought yet should have already been bought.
That's right.
That's what it comes down to, and we should be on a replenish cycle. One thing we did, I think it was 17, 18, we cut ambulances out because that was the year we had to do pay raises, and we looked for every penny that we could find, and that was one of the things that was cut in 17, 18, so that we could do pay raises.
I believe we bought a lot of patrol cars that year.
Probably.
Yeah.
But we didn't do last year's, or we budgeted for last year, and there was discussion They asked for a lot of money, and I'm gonna take the heat for this one, because this one's solely on me. The price of ambulances have gone up tremendously over the last 5 years. Truthfully, since the last one the county bought, which would have been 16, 17. Price of ambulances went up dramatically. And when they came back, Mr. Guarino and I actually had a conversation in Gerald's office about options, because there are other options versus what we currently buy. One of the options, you can buy a $50,000, it's a straight van, blah, 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 blah. It's an ambulance. You can put the word on your ambulance and take that home, I own one of them. But they're not fit for what we do, what our county EMS agency does. They do not work well. Now, there are places that make it work, but they would not work well in Pickens County, and I agree with that 100%. So we looked at from this extreme to that extreme and came up with the remount idea, and that's what was budgeted. And we still, the question was brought up, why have we not? And it came back that we couldn't find chassis, and so now we're punting. Saying that, we really needed 2 trucks at the beginning of last year's budget cycle, not at the end of, well, the beginning of this year's budget cycle, not the end of this year's budget cycle.
I do remember, because you're the expert on this, and I do remember you talking about how we don't need to buy it all at once, we can just stagger it.
Do one now, do one later.
Yeah, I do remember that. I just didn't understand what had happened as to why we didn't go ahead and move forward with what the plan was.
Is that not an option anymore with the
It
chassis
is, but
thing?
the problem they came back with, according to Mr. Guarino at last week's meeting, was, you know, with Rona and everything else, big problem is you don't have chassis. He actually had a vendor within the budget range and couldn't get chassis. That vendor can't get chassis.
So it's more of a supply side problem, not a not in market problem. It's available, it's just supply side right now is messed up.
And my question really was, why did we wait until now?
Right.
And to Ralph's defense, let's be honest, I actually said this.
That's what you did.
Ralph waits to the end of the budget cycle before he spends money, because you got to make sure you got it before you spend it. So that's one of those that, while I appreciate Ralph for what he does.
And we did bid it out, I think, late fall and everything, and then it came in way over budget, and then we kind of went back and forth what we should do and everything. We ended up ordering them, and just to update you, I received the check today from the company for approximately $187,000. So they sent the money back and we've received it.
Yeah, and saying that, I don't think there's any ill will, malice, or anything like that. One issue, by what I understand, because, you know, I know people, talk to people all the time, and I don't mind talking to people. If I saw Scott at Lowe's, I talked to him too, you know. But one issue is when you're used to speccing brand new trucks, you're used to speccing trucks one way. And it's been a long time since the county remounted a truck. A spec for a remount and a spec for a new truck are somewhat different, and different companies do different things, and they're all done different ways. And you know, I think initially when it was spec'd out versus the spec that went out the last time it was actually awarded, there was some changes that was made between those 2 specs. So, you know, some of it's been a learning curve on our side, and some of it's been supply and demand issues. So, and I agree 100% with the answer here. You do need 2 more trucks. Absolutely, you got to keep your cycle going.
The plan was to replace 2 ambulances those 2 ambulances every 8 years. So every year you're going to replace 2 ambulances, and that would get us on an 8-year rotation.
Which is a good rotation.
Right.
And for just to bring up, I wanted to bring up the reason that they were cut the first time. That was the budget. We had to find $3.5 million.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The rest of the questions were basically for informational purposes, for data. So I don't think we need to go over those, because you got that information in your packet. What other questions did you guys have before I asked for a vote on our reading of the second reading?
I have a question for Ralph.
He just sat down.
I know. You can get back up.
Come on, I might know.
You might know the answer. You know,
Your lack of faith.
I guess the first, we've got a 2% pay increase in this budget.
3%.
3%. How much money is that?
It's approximately, I'm not going to give you the exact dollar, but it's about $250,000 per 1%.
So we got $750,000 added to the budget for a pay increase. And for discussion, We're talking about everyone looking at the bottom line budget. And this is one of the things we have to talk about is that we're trying to cut out capital expenses. We're trying to keep this thing as lean as possible. And so I think it begs a discussion from council about a pay increase of 1%, 2%, 3% or more or whatever.
Well, and I think it's a absolutely fair question, clearly. But I'll tell you, part of the rationale is, and we referenced it before this meeting began in a roundabout manner, and that is for us to keep up with the market, whatever that market may be. We're having trouble filling positions. We're having trouble filling commercial appraiser positions, residential appraiser positions, commercial building codes inspectors. And so for us to fall behind is something that we're really concerned about as a staff. It may be, as Ralph referred to in the last budget meeting, that we phased that in when we were a little more comfortable with budget numbers, but 3% is the number we consider kind of as the minimum to keep us on track. We invested in that compensation plan a few years back, and it had some issues one way or the other, and we implemented as best we could. But for us to not keep up with it is something that's going to cause us problems down the road. So we kind of decided at the staff level that 3% is what we needed to keep us up to market. But again, if there's a time to implement that after we're a little more sure on revenues, that's a conversation too.
So in other words, it keeps us without raising the taxes. It's in the budget, but you don't implement it until you're sure that what I don't know is how do you figure out what that timeline is?
Well, what we had talked about is perhaps doing it quarterly, like don't start at July 1, start it in September when we have a better idea. Or maybe we come back to you and say, you know what, we're not comfortable with all 3% right now, let's do something different right now. So what we talked about is having that conversation continue, but trying to build the 3% in the budget because we feel like that's what we'll need.
We won't see much revenue in June, July, August. So there's no way to gauge. We won't see much in August, September, or October. So.
And what will the revenue change going into the spring of next year, or January, February, March, where most of our money comes in, right?
November, December, January, yeah.
So we don't know what might change based on, to Councilman Hudson's point, if we've got 10 businesses that didn't survive, or, there's a lot of variables there that we don't know what's gonna happen with the economy. I hope, as the president says, it does a V and goes straight up. And I still feel optimistic about that, but we have to plan we have to have a conscious plan as how that's going to happen.
You'll know the non-property tax revenue.
Yeah, we'll know what local option sales tax is, vehicle taxes, they come in every month. We'll know what Mile Creek Park revenues are, Register of Deeds, things like that, EMS revenues. It's not just taxes. That does make up a big portion, but most of the property taxes, which is a portion of the total taxes, that will come in November, December, January, a little bit of February.
But those other taxes, Mr. Chairman, are actually true gauges of the economy more than property tax.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, you're right.
Yeah. So yeah, we understand. This isn't going to be implemented July 1st unless something significantly changes, but I don't really see that changing for where we can implement it July 1st. We're probably looking at the fall. We could do what Mr. Roper talked about, is maybe we do a 1% in November or 1% in February, depending on how the revenues are coming in. But it's the same thing with capital. The plan was not just July 1st, everybody go at it and you can buy everything you want. My plan, as y'all know me, is really not to let you buy much unless it's essential. Right. What do we define as essential? I don't know that exact answer, but it's going to be public safety type items. It's going to be maybe a server for Register of Deeds, because we're getting a loaner from the company and they're saying we're going to want our system back because you promised us that you'll do your best to get us a server. There could be some other stuff. Copiers, we'll keep running the copiers until they die. I mean, they're 10, 12 years old, but our company has said we can't get parts for your copiers anymore. So when they die,
you're still using the blue ink thing?
Yeah, we'll go back to that, and we'll have the acetone that you can smell and everything, if you remember that. So we're not going to just wholeheartedly tell people, go out and buy everything you want for capital.
Right.
We're going to make an educated decision with the administrator and the department head to say, do you really need this now?
So if you're gonna do a 1%, let's say you say, I guess we would want to know the guidelines of what triggers that, and do you back pay to July 1st on the 1%?
We would not be able to back pay to July 1st. Our
So-
system is not set up to back pay to July 1st when you consider overtime and everything else that comes into play. It would be at that point going forward. And as we talked about at the last meeting, I think this is something we'd have to have some dialogue with council as we give monthly reports and everything on where we at with our revenues compared, in expenditures compared to the previous year.
So if we had it in the budget, but with the understanding that it gets implemented through our approval at the time frame.
Yeah, and that's what
Does
Mr.
that
Roper
need to
said.
be-
Is that
Does there need to
something
be
we
an
can
amendment to the
do?
budget to say that the 3%, but implemented on approval of council?
Well, does it need to be? No. Would you feel better if it were? Maybe. So what I'm saying is.
What kind of answer is that?
Once we approve the budget, then you're in charge of doing that
So
budget.
you will
from that
hold me
point forward.
accountable for not getting the subsequent approval, is what it sounds like. But if you feel more, that's what I'm saying, if you would feel more comfortable, make a resolution saying this is our desire, or you could amend the budget to say that's your desire, that it's got to come back for a subsequent vote before implementation, but I would like to go ahead and have it budgeted. But I think ultimately you're going to have to hold me responsible for that.
So I'm okay with it. What I'm saying, I'm okay with saying, hey, we're planning for the V economy and 3%, but we're holding you accountable. It's there if we're going that direction, but get approval from us.
I'm going to keep saying, Ralph, can we do it now? Can we do it now?
Well, I can tell you this, I've been here for 20 years. When I came here in June of 2000, we had about $11 million in fund balance. Today, we have about $31 million as of June of 2019. That didn't happen overnight, and that didn't happen with us spending on frivolous things. It's been by saving money, watching your pennies, and watching them grow over time. And that's why we're not in desperate needs like a lot of governments are, where they're at with their fund balance. I know some governments, and I won't say which ones, but they're having to sell their property just so they can meet revenues for the 2021 year. They're waiting on reimbursements from the federal government just to have revenues for 2021.
That's right.
That's not the way you handle a budget. So my philosophy is you save for a rainy day, which we've done over 20 years while I've been here. So you have a cushion to fall back on, even not even considering when you have to worry about cash flow in the fall. I'm very big, as y'all know, on cash flow. You've got to take that into account. And that's what I'm trying to do with the fire districts, is get them on a positive cash flow. But we're not going to do this kind of willy-nilly and just start July 1st approving everything. I don't think we've ever done that.
I remember when I was with the sheriff's office, when we went through a recession, and there was other sheriff's offices laying people off. I mean, it got that bad. I'm sure you remember. Pickens County never did that. And
No, we never laid off.
We kind of gave you credit for and I know as a former employee, we really appreciated the way you did and maintained a conservative budget. And I guess what we're all saying here today, we think it's even more critical right now.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like Councilman Bowers said earlier, I'm not a very popular person with the employees, but that's fine with me. I'm not here to win Mr. Congeniality, I'm here to do my job, and it's got us where we are today from being conservative and everything, so.
People love you, Ralph.
I know.
People love you.
I have a very thick skin, trust me.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, Mr. Greener and Mr. Smith. Thank you for taking your time and explaining some things to us, and of course, Mr. Roper, you as well. But also, I want to commend you guys, this council. This is our fourth year in a row, third, fourth year in a row. We've approved the budget without a tax increase, and that hasn't always been easy. But we've done that. We've done a lot of things during the past 4 years. And I want to say good job, guys.
We are a very blessed county. I have one more item I want you guys to think about, and before I call for the vote and then ask us to close out the meeting. I had sent a message to Mr. Roper, and I'm really anxious to hear your opinion. I'm especially anxious to hear your opinion, Mr. Vice Chairman. I was looking at, as we are planning, and this would pertain to if we figure out a way to do some of the budget, that as we are planning for coming out of this crisis, as we we are worrying about economic development or economic incentives for small businesses. And the important thing to me is how do we keep, once we get open, stay open. And one of the things that I was wanting to explore was how we could, as a county, create a test, trace, isolate policy when, as we go into the fall. And what that means is possibly partnering with somebody like Prisma Health or ANMED or somebody like that for ways to, I mean, basically, so it's I don't know how, I'm not coming up with the right words, but it's, if you test positive for COVID-19, then we've got to have the manpower and the people that are going to work to go trace who you've been around and ask those people to isolate. So, you know, and we're fortunate in the sense that we've had no deaths in the county. We've had 44 people that have contracted it. Currently, there's only 14 people that are on the list of people that are trying to recover from COVID-19. As we go, to me, it doesn't make sense to shut down the whole county of 125,000 people when, if we could isolate those 14 families going into the fall, maybe it falls in the line of providing, you know, because the flu season is going to kick back in. What could we provide flu shots for those people who are uninsured, who couldn't pay for it? There's about 11% of the people who live in the county that are not insured. And maybe we already have plans like that in place. I guess what I'm getting at is creating a public-private partnership with someone like a Prisma or an ANMED where it's a test, trace, and isolate. And as the president just announced today, they're testing 200,000 people a day. I think by the time we get to the fall, we may have more opportunity to get test kits. And when we see you got COVID-19, let's get you tested, let's get, because you touched all these people over the past, you know, how many ever days, following DHEC guidelines on that. I wanted to know, it would cost us money, which we'd have to take from general funds, which we've saved for a rainy day. To me, this is that portion of the rainy day fund that we would need to spend.
So before Mr. Roper speaks, I actually want to say something because I got a question for him during it. I think that that's something that we probably should have, if we haven't already had conversations amongst our I mean, let's be honest, that's part of this state of emergency that we're in. I don't know who's got static, maybe me, I don't know. Is it me? I don't know. Anyway, saying that, no. Anyway, saying that, I think that's something that the conversation ought to be taking place right now. I think that we should, and exploit's a really bad word, but you have the state and the federal state of emergency. You have the CARES Act that frees up money for this, that, and the other. Structure needs to be in place before we ever come out of this state of emergency to do exactly what you're talking about.
I'm talking about for the fall, as we plan for, yeah, go ahead.
But that starts today. It actually should have started about however many days ago, because test, trace, isolate has been topic of conversation since day one. That phrase has been. And if you could have, then you're right, you wouldn't have had to shut down the world. But unfortunately, the speed in which it hit, the availability of tests, the information that we had on COVID-19, or more the information we didn't have on COVID-19 that we now are learning. One promising thing for the fall, test kits should be more available. Better test kits. I was talking to Mr. Roper, and some of you may not know this, but if you go to a Prisma facility in the upstate, in the beginning, we were sending tests down to DHEC.
Right.
So we could swab, but it may sit on a counter for 7 days waiting on reagent. Now, you go to a Prisma facility, they have an approved, FDA-approved test, and in 4 hours, you get a result. And that's not a plug for Prisma. I'm sure ANMED has something similar, I'm sure, but I know for a fact Prisma does it because my facility uses it. That is something that a couple months ago wasn't even possible. Saying that, tests are going to be more available, so it is important. We should have already. But education on...
Marketing is a part of that, absolutely.
So education on the test, trace, isolate, because a lot of people don't really understand what it means. There was a facility, there's a big business in Pickens County that realized, oh crap, we had 2 employees that tested positive for COVID-19, and their idea of trace was, go look and see who they came in contact with the last 24 hours. That's not tracing. That's not tracing at all. So, and I think part of that's gonna be Ray Farley and him using his contacts to get into the business community and et cetera, et cetera. But waiting any longer, that should have actually already been started.
My question is, do we have a policy in place? Should we have a policy in place? And what should that look like? And would it require additional funding as a part of this budget?
So, multi-part question, I will tell you that it's conversations we have been having. There was some discussion about tonight's Kickstart presentation, including a testing component for you. And as you all are aware, although we didn't want to get too far in this, we've taken a substantial step in that direction just today. And we'll give more information on that as when the time is appropriate. But in terms of what would it cost to have something formal from the county, that's some data we'll have to get to you. We've had conversations about testing throughout, because I'm hearing the same things you all are hearing, and that is if we do open back up and we are not testing and taking the test seriously, taking the results seriously, then we're just setting ourselves to close back down again.
Right.
So what I would say to you is let us bring something more formal to you, kind of a third component of the Kickstart is the way I would look at it, and we'll bring that back to you at your next meeting.
Okay, great. At this point, I'd like to ask a call for the vote on the reading of the Second Amendment. Second Amendment. Board.
I'm all
Second
for the
reading.
Second reading.
Here we go again.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry, let me make it formal. The second reading of ordinance number 583 to provide for the levy of taxes in Pickens County for the ordinary county purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020, ending June 30, 2021, and direct expenditure thereof, including the amendments that we have made. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And that motion carries. Now,
I'll make a motion that we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Councilman Hendricks. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all 10 people.
Thank you, Mr. Greeno. Thank you,
Thanks.
Chief
Ralph.
Smith.
I appreciate the compliment. I took it the right way.